To order. Will staff please confirm the presence of a quorum?
Ms. Berkman.
Here.
Mr. Deck.
Here.
Mr. Horke.
Here.
Mr. Johns.
Here.
Dr. Kelleher.
Here.
Mr. Maui.
Here.
Mr. McCarty.
Here.
Mr. Schmitz.
Here.
Ms. Spoljaric.
Here.
We have quorum.
Thank you. First item on tonight's agenda is election of officers and the appointment of our BZA representative. The current office holders and representative, if there is nobody wanting to argue and fight for the privilege, we are all willing to continue in our current capacities. So look for expressions of interest or nominations.
I would like to nominate Mr. Horke for president.
I second that.
Thank you. I willingly accept.
Congratulations.
Yes. Should we do this individually or as voice,
We should do it individually.
like we've been doing? Okay, please call the roll.
Ms. Berkman.
Yes.
Mr. Deck.
Yes.
Mr. Horke.
Yes.
Mr. Johns.
Yes.
Dr. Kelleher.
Yes.
Mr. Maui.
Yes.
Mr. McCarty.
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz.
Yes.
Ms. Spoljaric.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. I would like to nominate Ginny Kelleher to continue as vice president.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded for Ginny Kelleher to continue. If there's no objections, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Deck.
Yes.
Mr. Horke.
Yes.
Mr. Johns.
Yes.
Dr. Kelleher.
Yes.
Mr. Maui.
Yes.
Mr. McCarty.
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz.
Yes.
Ms. Spoljaric.
Yes.
Ms. Berkman.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. I would also go ahead and move that we appoint Dave Schmitz to continue as our BZA representative.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded, I believe, by Dr. Kelleher. If there are no objections, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Horke.
Yes.
Mr. Johns.
Yes.
Dr. Kelleher.
Yes.
Mr. Maui.
Yes.
Mr. McCarty.
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz.
Yes.
Ms. Spoljaric.
Yes.
Ms. Berkman.
Yes.
Mr. Deck.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on, as we can all remain where we are seated. Item next is approval of the minutes of our December 20th, 2021 meeting.
Make a motion to approve the minutes of the December 20th, 2021 meeting as written.
Thank
I'll
you.
second
Is
that.
there a second? Second by Andre Maui. Staff, please call the roll.
Ms. Berkman.
Yes.
Mr. Deck.
Yes.
Mr. Horke.
Yes.
Mr. Johns.
Yes.
Dr. Kelleher.
Yes.
Mr. Maui.
Yes.
Mr. McCarty.
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz.
Yes.
Ms. Spoljaric.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Will staff please review the rules of procedure for tonight's meeting that contains all of our various types of options to review tonight?
Due to the COVID-19 emergency as declared by the Governor of Indiana, the format and conduct of the meeting has been modified to comply with executive orders regarding the conduct of public meetings, public hearings, and public gatherings. Relevant portion of the Indiana Open Door Law have been amended or suspended during the pendency of the emergency. For items requiring a public hearing, tonight's meeting has the following structure. The department will summarize the petition, then the petitioner will be given up to 15 minutes to present to the Plan Commission. The president will open a public hearing. Individuals will be given 3 minutes to speak. The public hearing will be closed when all interested members of the audience have had a chance to be heard. The petitioner will then have a chance to respond to comments, and the Plan Commission will follow with any comments, questions, or concerns regarding the petition. For items that do not require a public hearing, the department will summarize the petition and highlight any changes or modifications since the item was last before the Plan Commission. The department will also describe what action, if any, is necessary to be taken, and the petitioner will be given up to 15 minutes to present any changes, and the Plan Commission will then act upon the petition. For the rules of conduct this evening, please do not disrupt the proceedings in any way. If you need to have a private discussion, then we ask that you please quietly exit the room. Please silence your devices at this time. If you must answer them, please quietly exit the room. If you wish to speak in regard to a petition scheduled for a public hearing, then please fill out a yellow card available up here next to Kevin and bring it to the desk prior to the presentation of the petition. During your comments, please state your name and address into the microphone for the record. We ask that you not repeat previously stated comments. Your presentation will be timed, and you will be advised when there is approximately 30 seconds remaining. We would like to remind everyone to please speak directly into the microphone so your comments can be heard. If a member of the public has any comments regarding the petition, that is not present this evening, they should be emailed to planners@westfield.in.gov with the petition name or number included in the subject line. Those comments will be forwarded to board members and the petitioner. For those members that are virtual, please have your email accessible during the meeting so you can read new comments when they are available, and please mute your microphone when not speaking. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one item on the consent agenda this evening. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented in the staff report.
Second?
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Will staff please call the roll?
Mr. Johns?
Yes.
Dr. Kelleher? Mr. Maui?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. McCarty?
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz?
Yes.
Ms. Spoljaric?
Yes.
Ms. Berkman?
Yes.
Mr. Deck?
Yes.
Mr. Horke?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on, we have two items of business in front of us this evening. The first is the Springwater PUD, petition number 2112-PUD-29.
Thank you. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Good evening, members of the commission. For the record, Rachel Remschneider with the Community Development Department. The item before you this evening is the Springwater PUD. The proposal is for approximately 49 acres on the east side of South Union Street, north of 161st Street. The PUD proposes a residential development with both townhomes and single-family homes while preserving the existing residence and store. The Springwater PUD had its public hearing on Monday, December 6th. It was properly noticed and advertised. Staff has received one comment since the public hearing, which has been incorporated into the exhibits for this evening. The item is here tonight requesting a recommendation to council. I believe Justin Moffett of Old Town Design and representatives from Apollo Developers are here to present the details of the project. They are able to answer any questions, as am I, if you have any for staff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Ed Hamilton with Apollo Developers. Justin Moffett was not able to attend. But, Apollo Developers is a joint venture partner with Old Town Design Group on this project and with the Beauchamps. And there we go. Sorry about that. Okay, we can skip to the next slide. Rachel already showed this one. Just a refresher, this is the comprehensive plan. There's a little sliver of the site, the western edge of this site that's within the employment corridor. The rest of the site is within the suburban residential. This was the prior concept site plan we presented last month. We received several comments regarding the 3-story townhomes that were facing Union Street. We've gone back, regrouped, and we've decided to replace the 3-story townhomes with 2-story townhomes to minimize the impact along Union Street. The other item we had received a lot of feedback on is not necessarily in the site plan, but the architectural standards. That was probably the second largest amount of feedback, and we've tightened up our language. We've added a lot more architectural guidelines with staffs, a lot of feedback with staff to get that tightened up. I'm going to go ahead. Can you skip over to 2 more? Another item we've added to the site plan in response to comments, if you look along the access road to reach the antique shop in the back, we've actually added a separate 6-foot trail that runs adjacent to that road to provide additional safety. There'll be at least there'll be a buffer between the road and the trail with landscaping in order to make it aesthetically pleasing and safer for pedestrian traffic. In addition, to help reduce the impact, the longevity of the homes along Union Street, we broke it up with landscape corridor in the middle of it that extends to a nice courtyard between the townhomes, and then extends beyond to the street to the east to provide another access point for residents to walk to the trail along Union Street. And then if you go back one, and here's a list of some of those major revisions we talked about. So reducing the 3-story townhomes to 2-story actually reduced our total number of townhouses from 56 to 37. The single-family home, both the rear load and the front load, both remained the same. So the overall density has decreased. We reduced the townhomes at the northwest corner. We had some that ran east-west in addition to north-south. We removed the east-west in order to minimize the impact of the trees in that section. That was another comment we received. We talked about the open space around the townhouses with the courtyard. The other thing is the buffer. We had a couple questions about the buffer. So the UDO requires a 40-foot buffer between SF2 or SF4 and multifamily and Ag SF1. So we're providing the 40-foot buffer throughout. We did ask that where we do have mature trees to get a credit to preserve those trees, and instead of a buffer, provide a tree preservation easement. The one area that it impacted was on the east side. I'll go back to that in a minute when we get back to the site plan. Another comment received was the natural areas, concern for impacting them. We redesigned the floodplain compensatory storage mitigation pond to provide as a dry bottom with native landscaping so that the wildlife can continue to use it just like they do now. We took a hard look at naturalizing as much of the area as we could in order to minimize that impact. And what we found was the areas of the existing natural areas versus proposed, we were actually increasing the natural areas because we were essentially replacing a lot of area that's being currently farmed with natural areas. And then, as I mentioned, we added that 6-foot trail along the access drive to the antique store. Next slide, please. Yep. So along that east property line, there was a question also about the buffer there, if it was whether it was a buffer or an easement. That east side, we did originally have just a 30-foot tree preservation easement. We've met with all the property owners that went up against that property line. They asked for an additional 10 feet and some additional evergreen trees in that to provide a full 40-foot buffer with additional evergreen screening. And we've complied with the request with the number of trees. We were happy to do that. So that was that change. The other part of that was there was a question about whether it was really a buffer or just an easement. We initially had shown it as a buffer before we had presented to you last month, but Old Town has had some experience in neighborhoods that back up to woods that create common area strip for the HOA to maintain. And it had become an issue with some of the residents that live back there to have people feel like they can walk behind their homes. So the CCRs will have requirements in there for maintenance of those, but it's an easement so that either the homeowner or the HOA will maintain that in accordance with the easement requirements. But that's why it was not shown as common area, so that to provide that sense of privacy for those homeowners. And then go to the next slide. Here's that area. This is what we originally showed with that 30-foot tree preservation easement. We'll provide an additional 10-foot easement there along that east property line with evergreen trees. Keep going. And more time. Here's the open space amenity exhibit. So a few of the changes I'll highlight is that floodplain mitigation pond. It's now shown as yellow instead of blue, so it's not going to be open water. It's going to be natural vegetation. Also clarifying that all the areas along Union Street to the south of the project where we extend the trail south will all be revegetated with native vegetation. And then you can see up at the northwest corner, we preserved a little bit more of the trees. That was a concern. And then there's a little bit of the green space there in the middle of those townhomes to kind of break that up a little bit more. And then the stats are on the side if you had a chance to take a look at that to document the natural areas and the mature woods that we're saving. right, next slide. Here's a new slide. There was some questions about the streetscape along Union Street. We're trying to maintain as much diversity as we can with still giving artistic liberties to the architects to come up with the semi-customized design of the townhomes. So this is the 8-foot trail. This is the location we had coordinated with the engineering department. The Union Street is actually considered a secondary arterial in the thoroughfare plan, which is a 60-foot half right-of-way dedication. With the connector road, it's going to be treated eventually as a collector road, not a secondary arterial. So the trail's not pushed all the way to the right-of-way, so we still have a 11 foot average, 8 to 14 foot minimum buffer between the townhome front and the trail to provide some significant landscaping. We are agreeable to meeting all the landscaping requirements of the EDO for all the foundation plantings and trees for each lot. We're suggesting we provide a little more diversity in our landscaping with the minimum 6 species in order to provide that diversity. I'll also note that even though we're pretty close to that right-of-way line, like I said, it was based on the thoroughfare plan, we're still a minimum of 10 feet further from the center line of the road than the buildings that were required at Lantern Commons. We got a little bit more of a setback on our side. We also have, we're also showing that the front of the townhomes will have a stagger in them in order to provide a little bit more of a break in the front facade. And they'll also have various outdoor living areas on the back so that they'll have some variety as well. Next slide. And I'll just reiterate one more time. Keep going. Here's the transitional architecture townhomes that we had presented to you a month ago. Just to remind you, we're now proposing 2-story townhomes. So this is the same slide we showed you before. There is a 3-story example in here. We're proposing it would be the 2-story that would be shown up in the top right-hand corners and in the bottom right-hand corner. With similar landscaping feature and streetscape look is that bottom right corner, with the exception of the trees between the trail and the street, which the city doesn't require that. So with that, we tried to make modifications based on the feedback we received at the last meeting. We think we came a long way going from the 3-story to the 2-story townhomes based on feedback. Subsequently, we received some additional feedback. I'm not sure we're quite where everybody wants us to be. We're willing to keep working at that. With that, I'll leave it up to some questions.
Thank you. The floor is open for commissioners that may have questions or comments for the petitioner or staff.
I'll jump in first. First of all, I know that I have some concerns and criticisms, and they're not personal, because I think Justin is a great guy and a great builder, and I know the Beauchamps want this to be a wonderful project. From what you presented tonight, there are some changes that still need to be made and tweaked in the PUD, so I'm not sure we're ready for a vote, but that's entirely up to you as to whether you want to proceed. You've talked about a few things in the PUD, like changing pictures of the townhomes, if they're going to be 2-story rather than 3. The east property line, adding 10 feet, that isn't in the existing pictures in the PUD that I could find anyway. It's on the concept plan, but it was not on the landscape plan, that extra 10 feet. So there's some other little things, and I won't go into details of the PUD as it's written, because I think we have a bigger issue, and that is to hopefully be able to sit down and walk through this. First of all, the big picture is this is a very sensitive and beautiful piece of land. It's sensitive for 2 reasons. Number one, it's an entrance to Westfield. It's not in the downtown, as you pointed out. It is in the new suburban, and it is surrounded by agricultural, AGSF1, large lot residential on almost all sides, except for the Lantern Commons. And in Lantern Commons, we tried to pay special attention to that when we required no more than 2 stories and a low-intensity use in that northeast corner, which I think will be a retirement home or, assisted living facility. While this is also a very environmentally sensitive piece of land, there are several sections of our comp plan that talked about preserving existing woodlands and sensitive areas as best we can. While there is a great deal of open space and preserved woodlands here, most of this land is unbuildable. And if you can see, brought my own pointer, so hopefully it works. The red line that goes somewhere along here, everything below, right up here, is that where it is? A lot of this is floodplain, so much of this area can't be built on anyway. There is a stream that goes through here, and the county requires a 75-foot setback from the top bank of the bank on either side of that stream. So much of that land is not buildable in the first place. I had hoped to see a little bit more preservation of some of the woodlands and areas that you actually could build on. I believe that the high-density SF4 section in the upper area is fine. The lot sizes, I'm not opposed to smaller lot sizes if we can save some of the mature woods. What I am concerned about is the transition from those surrounding large lot property owners, and we had asked that you speak with them, and it sounds like you have. So if there's now a consensus on what they're happy with by adding 10 feet, I'm happy with that, because I think we really need to pay attention to them. The other concern is on the east-western side of this property, abutting the other AGSF1 large lot properties in Woodside. I don't think we've done an adequate job of transitioning. You have townhomes there, and I'm not sure we need to have that excessive a change, because that land abuts on Union Street, it abuts Woodside, and it abuts the north part of Lantern Commons, which, as I said, is a retirement home, 2-story maximum, that was especially done to hopefully mitigate some of the effects of Lantern Commons from the residential above. And I'm not sure putting townhomes along there is the best way we can do it. So I'm opposed to the ones north of your entrance, absolutely, because I just don't think that's a good transition. I think it's just not good enough. I have seen some other developments where there were townhomes that had alley loads that came in off the street and had, for lack of a better word, cul-de-sacs. And if you would go up and visit Centennial along 156th Street, those townhomes, instead of facing the road, are facing each other with central cul-de-sacs. I think there's a better way, if we're going to do townhomes at all, which I'm not sure is the right thing to do. I think there's a better way to have a streetscape than just facing them all along the road. I think we can have more open areas. Because if you go up Union, there is nothing other than residential on this side of the street. And to then come down and put townhomes, even if they're 2-story, I have a problem with. I know that both Andre and Cindy said at the public hearing last time that this ordinance runs with the land, not the developer. So as much as we like Justin and respect his work, we have to look at this and decide, would we approve this in the current form if it were Pulte or Arbor or Estridge or somebody else, or somebody we don't even know. In the PU document itself, I have several areas of concern, which I won't go into. Some of them are inconsistencies, and I've discussed them with staff. And I think you mentioned a few things tonight that still need to be tweaked in the ordinance. One of those is, how do we evaluate designs from these pictures, and how does the staff decide quality based on these pictures? We have architectural standards, which, by the way, we went from a first floor brick wrap on the townhomes to a water table, which to me is a foundation. So that's a huge change. I'm not opposed to that change, or water tables instead of full brick wraps. I want to allow creativity. But it's an area that I think could be abused, not necessarily by you, but it's an area in the PUD that I think could be abused. Also, the concept plan does not state it will be in, the plan says it will not be in, doesn't say it will be in substantial compliance with the concept plan. The only thing that will be in substantial compliance is the location of the 3 areas. Normally, we have in our PUDs that the plan will be consistent with the plan here, and that doesn't say this. So any of the arrangements of those homes or anything, apartments or whatever in those areas could be entirely different, since it's not tied to it. Just a side note, on the designs, they are very modern, not traditional, and I know that's something that Justin wants to do and thinks are necessary or would work here. I am concerned about some of that, because at previous meetings, I've heard Justin say that everybody in Carmel wants traditional. So I'm a little concerned that we might build something that wouldn't be popular in another 5 years if we got too edgy. So I have a little bit of concern about that, although that won't have anything to do with how I vote, but I just wanted to express my concerns. And I'll turn it over to somebody else if they want to speak.
And if you want to remain up at the podium to be able to respond, you are welcome to do so, if that would be helpful to hear your thoughts
Oh, one
around
other,
here.
one other quick thing, under uses, SF4 zoning does allow educational institutions with dormitories, so you may want to remove that one.
We will.
Mr. Horke, this is Justin Waffen on the line. Can you hear me?
Hello, Justin.
Good evening.
Pl- Please weigh in if you have a comment.
I would. Thank you. You know, I'm finding that we're rehashing some things that I don't believe that we had real solid clarity on coming out of the last meeting. I think there was some very broad critique, but I think it's getting much more specific. And I think you've learned that we're pretty receptive to listening and feedback and processing it. But I think as this whole dialogue is unveiling itself, we're finding that we didn't leave the last meeting with very clear instruction. So I'll say that's our position for tonight. And, you know, I'm a firm believer in the workshop process and trying to come to consensus on what's a healthy transition. But, you know, I feel like a lot of comment on, you know, Lantern Commons not being all that dense and thoughtful transition. I don't think we see the Union Street corridor with the same lens as maybe some of the APC members, in that it is an eclectic mix of uses marching north from 161st Street to State Road 32. I mean, it's a stretch to say that we're nearly surrounded by Ag SF1. We have it on several sides, but we have a new Pulte subdivision, we have Lantern Commons, we have cemetery, we have 3 apartment complexes with units facing Union Street. We have 2 churches, we have a Bible college. It is such a diverse mix of uses too. So I feel like the way the comments are being presented, it's as if that we have this quaint single-family village of all these single-family homes faced in Union Street, and that's just not the lens that we see Union Street as. And I'm not saying, you know, one's right or one's wrong. I'm just acknowledging that when we've planned this Springwater subdivision, we've clearly had a lens that we're needing to transition product types away from what was approved at Lantern Commons into our development plan. And we have, you know, in our careers have learned that's responsible traditional neighborhood design is, you know, take the burden of transition onto your property as we move to the other surrounding uses. So I'm hearing more clearly now that there's an opposition to anything that represents a townhomes type structure across from Woodside Drive. I think we can now then go look at other planning alternatives. But I would just acknowledge that having this level of detail is very helpful. And if there were an opportunity to more specifically workshop this project, since it is, you know, a sensitive site in the community's eyes, then we welcome that kind of additional depth of dialogue.
Okay, thank you. We've heard from Dr. Kelleher. There's lots of others here that may have additional thoughts and comments, so let's continue, and anybody else that would like to jump in right now and
You wanna go?
share
Let me
some
go. Okay.
similar or different thoughts, please do.
Thank you, Bob. This is Kristin Berkman, for those that are online here with us this evening. I also share Dr. Kelleher, pretty much everything she said, so I won't repeat it. But another area that I would really like us to think about is that buffer for the east large parcels. This is a complex situation, and I heard what you said about they don't want people in their backyards. I understand that. Yet, when you put a buffer as part of someone's property, they own it, and they could go cut those trees down. And it gets very tricky to put that in an HOA agreement to say you can't cut things down on your property. Some people don't like trees, and they like to clear it. So that's an area I'd really like to have more discussion on, please. I think those neighbors deserve a very good buffer. This isn't, going SF4 to AGSF1 is a huge jump. And so I would just like more discussion on that. Now I'll turn to the neighbor at Woodside. And I think that Dr. Kelleher already touched on this, but they also deserve a buffer. This area, and I'm glad we have the overview up, if everybody can kind of see the light black lines, this area is very full of large parcels and large parcel residents. And so we need to take that into account here contextually, and I know we're transitioning from Lantern Commons to the east, but this is definitely a neighborhood of large lots. So as Mr. Moffett said, we all have a different lens. That's the lens I see this area as, and that we need to be respectful to all those that are living here and paying taxes here as new development comes in. I'd also like to, and I had sent a lot of these comments to the petitioner earlier, so I won't go into big detail, but the landscaping along the trail continues to be something that I'm unclear on, and I know you showed an overhead view of that a few moments ago, but I wasn't understanding the trees among that landscaping, so further clarification on that would be appreciated. And the other thing that I did mention in my comments is that there is an area along Town Road that borders the Village of West Clay. It's part of it. But those are single-family alley load homes between 126th and 121st. And across the street is commercial. So I do think there's examples where it will work to have single-family homes across the street from especially a low-impact commercial use as what this is facing, which Dr. Kelleher mentioned. It's assisted living or education without a dormitory or nursing home, I believe. So if we can take a look at that, I would appreciate it. And I think that wraps up my comments for tonight. I also shared Dr. Kelleher's concern about being in compliance between the PUD and the exhibits, because that's a little unclear right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Others? To my left, perhaps?
Well, I'd like to say I agree with everything that's been said so far. And also, right now, this PUD has got so many inconsistencies and is quite confusing. There's a lot of errors and things that say one thing, and then there's a diagram with something else. And I think this needs quite a bit of work. I know I would like to see it go to a workshop situation. That's it.
Okay. Mike? Dave?
I would just agree with everything that's been said so far, and I think there are some inconsistencies which really kind of bothered me when I went through this. I do, and I am sensitive to the properties, proposed townhouses right across from Woodside Drive. Gives me a little heartburn. But I do think this would be a great project to go to a workshop type of an atmosphere where we could sit around and really kind of dig into it, and both the design as well as the concept plan as a whole.
Okay, thank you.
So I can't say I agree with everything. I respect all my fellow commission members here. I'll agree with some and disagree with other things, and then I guess that leaves Old Town and Apollo to sort out and vote count or whatever. I do agree, and good catch, Dr. Kelleher, on needing substantial compliance with the concept plan. I think that's very important. One of the things I like about the concept plan is the way it notably respects what's there in terms of the topography and the features and things like that. It is clearly not just a layout that's plopped into the site. It's worked into the site the way it needs to be. So I think that verbiage needs to be in there. I'm glad you caught that. One of the things I disagree on what I've heard so far is I'm actually okay with the transition using the townhomes and then back to the single family. That doesn't bother me. The 3-story version gave me heartburn, but dropping down to 2, I'm okay with. I was still a little bit on the fence though, and this is, I agree with others, townhouses across from Woodside. So I don't know if that's something where a version of this concept works, just lopping those off, or that means to make it work out for you, you have to rearrange and put single family there. I'm not really sure what that means for you, but that is the corner that still gives me a little bit of concern there. I get the challenge with that buffering on the east side. It seems like the CCRs ought to be able to cover that, but I know what you're trying to do, and I respect that as well. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I first want to say that I'm very thankful that the Beauchamps have been able to be part of this project. I think it's better because of your guys' involvement, and your dedication to this community is just awesome. So thank you for being part of this development. Just adding my own unique take to it, and speaking of uniqueness, I think this is a great, unique project for Westfield. I love the concept plan. I love the models that might be put into it. I just think that adds its own flavor to something that we don't have in Westfield yet. So I commend you on that aspect. I also want to commend you. I looked back at my notes from the last meeting. Every single concern that I wrote down was addressed. When you popped that up on the screen, I was like, wow, that's amazing. I wish all developers would do something like that. I mean, that was awesome. I love seeing the courtyard. I love that it went from 3 to 2-story, like others up here have said. 3 definitely had a level of concern, but 2, that's definitely easier to swallow. But in terms of just one concern I have left is, as others have mentioned, the northern part of the townhomes that would be across from Woodside Drive. So would I have been ready to vote on this tonight? Push comes to shove, yes, but with everyone laying out their concerns and from what I'm hearing, in agreement with really wanting to make sure we take care of those neighbors across from Woodside Drive, that I think that's the biggest concern that needs to be nailed down, besides some of the language in the project. But thank you.
Thank you. David and Matt?
Yeah, I just chime in for a minute or so. To not belabor things too much, I think Andre expressed a lot of my feelings probably better than I would have. So I would say I align with where Andre sits on this. Perhaps maybe expand a little bit. I do feel probably I don't have a problem with the townhomes as a transition to Lantern Commons. However, the 6 or 7 units across from Woodside are problematic, particularly in light of the fact that that's a big chunk of woods that comes out if I am reviewing the aerial properly. So that's pretty much it. That's the other concerns that have been brought up I share, and that's where I am.
Thank you. Matt?
I think from the first meeting, one of my concerns was the 3-story townhomes. It just seemed to be rather claustrophobic along the road there with what's on the other side. But it sounds like looks like you've made some improvements to the buffering and with the landscaping and then the trail and all that. So I think that's definitely moving in the right direction. Seems like we're moving towards more of a workshop and further discussion tonight, which I think can never hurt. But in the end, I get the feeling that hopefully this commission will go ahead and figure out how to approve this zoning change, and that got a great combination between a great piece of land, great owners of that land, and a great product with Apollo and Old Town I can just envision that type of product going into that location and really enhancing the area. And just from my strong connections to the real estate community, folks are wanting a mix of modern and traditional, and I wouldn't imagine you have any trouble at all selling the modern look, so.
Thank you. The leap from presentation to what we have in front of us tonight has been terrific. And I think largely, sounds like most of us have had concerns addressed, mostly satisfactory. I do have a concern remaining that if we've got too many inconsistencies in the document, that really needs to be cleaned up. The 7 townhomes north of the entry drive warrant some sort of a consideration for elimination or a different product or somehow or other turning them into something more palatable. There's been a lot of discussions about going to a workshop. Justin himself and his remote comments mentioned that's the same. Does staff have some thoughts on how that might work if everybody, both sides of the table, are agreeable to pursue something like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So that's, we're jumping ahead a little bit here procedurally. I know I've spoken with Plan Commission members offline in the last week or so about us modifying our process moving forward. That's not currently in place.
Right.
We're still kind of going through the rules of procedure and the UDO to see what changes, if any, are necessary in order to make that a reality. However, given that there might be some, I mean, both parties here seem interested in, and I don't want to speak for the petitioner, but if I heard Justin correctly, interested in making something like that happen, I think we would have to, under current rules and circumstances, I think we would have to make that happen in this space. I know we talked about possibilities of other venues for a workshop discussion in the future, but that's currently not in place. So we'd have to make that work here. So if there's a future discussion on this petition prior to making any changes to our process formally, we'll just have to do it at our next meeting, I suppose.
Okay, and that's kind of why I was asking the question, because I knew we were evolving towards trying to integrate that to our processes where it's necessary and helpful, and we're not there yet. We are 2 weeks to another meeting.
That's right.
Which will be on a Monday.
Maybe 3.
We have another
the way the
February meeting
calendar
later
falls.
on a Tuesday. But if we feel that doing this at a scheduled meeting is the only option, then that's what we would need to pursue with whatever it is that might come about as far as changes that we could see ahead of time. Justin, I assume you're still on the call. Do you have any comments that you'd like to make regarding how this is evolving?
Yes, sir. Ultimately, I feel like that we've gotten greater clarity just in the last few days from comments shared. I think it'll help us to create another iteration, and then again, we're here to get it right and make sure that, you know, I'm not sure we'll satisfy everybody's last concern, but I do think that through listening, we still have some adjustments we can make, and I think we owe it to you to bring those back. And if we need to, you know, have more deep discussion and then continue to defer approval, I mean, we're fine with that. I mean, you obviously know that we like to get to the process expediently, but on something that's sensitive, we don't want to rush it either, and want to make sure that everybody's issues are addressed fully. So I think that we'll take that as marching orders to come back at the first meeting in February and present a new round of plans based on the more specific comments related to the property, specifically due east of Woodside Drive, and specifically that east buffer. I have to acknowledge that, Kristin, I did not fully grasp that your concern there, that it's not in common area versus on somebody's private property. So I think there's some items like that just, it's hard to vet out when we just hear comments or see written comments. I think when we can vet it out in a public forum like this and debate it a little, I think it's healthy for us. So appreciate the patience with this, and we'll look forward to having further discussion at the next meeting.
Okay, and I just looked at my calendar and realized that it's actually a day under 3 weeks, so there is quite a bit of time to address things and get us a package to review ahead of that meeting, and we'll devote a similar amount of time in a similar format to proceeding forward then at that time. Is there other
Thank you so
comments?
much.
Yeah, Kevin, I don't want to, because we don't have the setup yet for this committee or discussion group in our agenda, I really don't want to have to make Justin and his people wait for it until we do that, and that wasn't your intent. So I think either setting up a freestanding meeting, public noticing it and having it here, or if Justin and his team prefer to do it at our next APC meeting, we could have a big agenda. So I really would like to have the time for us to sit at a round table, and we can do it in this room. We've done it before, just big table in the front and everybody sits around it, and be able to just go back and forth much better than we do here. And we could do that as a freestanding meeting, still be on the agenda for next time, but maybe have that before, so that if there were any big issues, they could be sorted out and we wouldn't have to continue this, because I don't want to drag this out. I support the project. There are just some issues that I think needed more clarification.
Does staff have a feel for how much might actually be on our first agenda for February?
Yeah, I don't think we're anticipating it being very big at this point, so, yeah.
Kevin, may I ask a question?
Yeah.
I know this is before my time on the Plan Commission, but I know that at one time there were some committees where it wasn't a quorum. Is that something that would be kind of maybe something to do in this gap between the times and pilot this idea of these workshops and kind of learn from it? I'm just throwing that out as an idea to help Old Town and Apollo move down the road with this.
Right. It used to be that the president could appoint a special committee for a very large project, and that would be less than a quorum, a staff member, and the petitioners. I don't know if that's another option to do that.
Well, yeah, and I guess I'd like to consult with our legal counsel on that. I don't know the answer because our rules are currently not set up that way. So I don't know off the top of my head statutorily if there's just, or if it was a previous rule that allowed the Plan Commission to set up those committees,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So I don't know. I don't have a good answer at this point. I don't think, I mean, this is not having anything to do with this petition. I don't think the changes that we are talking about are going to be lengthy. I don't think it's going to take a lot of time for us to get there. But we do have a couple of projects in process, so I hear what you're saying. Is there a way we can maybe slow roll this a little bit? I mean, it sounds like we have willing participants really on all sides. If there's a way we can schedule a special meeting or something in between, I think we can look at that. But I don't have answers tonight.
And I think, I get the sense that we're not miles apart anymore, and it sounds like we have a willing developer to wait for the first meeting in February. So I think we need to address how we're proceeding to create this environment to have it available later, but not try to do it on a crash course basis right now. If Justin's perfectly fine with working, getting back to us and having a similar dialogue on February 7th.
Okay.
Sounds like we're going, I mean, sounds like there's no reason not to just go ahead and do that.
And there's been instances when you circulate site plans, updates prior to the Thursday when you send everything out. So if the petitioner got the materials to you early enough for that to be, perhaps we'd have that week and there'd be an opportunity to get some feedback prior to even that Thursday when you send out final materials.
That's a really good point, Dave, because the problem is, for example, this past weekend I was unavailable, and when we get something on a Thursday evening after 5 o'clock, along with a whole bunch of other things on our agenda, it's really difficult to get our comments to the petitioner in time, and I feel bad about that, but it's just the way the current system works. So, as Dave said, if we could get updates earlier, that we might be able to get comments in, That
Not
would
necessarily
certainly-
even the staff report, even if the petitioner just had any changes that they had made, get those circulated and forwarded out. May not even be the final version that's done, sent out the Thursday.
Yeah,
Justin, I was just gonna ask Justin, what do you think your turnaround time, what you've gathered from tonight, would that be 2 weeks or less, such that it could get to staff who could take a preliminary pass through it, provide some comments and get it to us roughly a week ahead of our next meeting?
I think that sounds reasonable, and I appreciate the workshop dialogue, because I think it just points out the need for that opportunity when we have, projects that rise to that level of extra scrutiny. And so it sounds like in this case, we'll be able to make some meaningful progress in the next 2 weeks on our own, bring it back to you at your first meeting in February, but would strongly encourage the opportunity to workshop future projects, because I think that would be helpful to both sides.
Okay, well, we are heading that way. We're just not there yet.
Justin, this is Kevin. Would you anticipate a vote on February 7th or not? Just to set the expectations. I mean, and maybe you don't answer that right now if you need to think about it, but I mean, I think that's going to be a question.
I think if it feels appropriate at the time, great. But again, we're here to get it right and make sure that I know that we won't necessarily reach 100% agreement on every issue, but I still feel like there's work to do. And I think us getting documentation to you a little earlier, so that if we can get some Plan Commission additional feedback a week prior rather than the day of, it'll help us respond. So we'll work to get sent things to you earlier than required.
Yeah, and we can certainly get that information out to the Plan Commission as soon as we get it at least a week ahead of the meeting.
Right.
And if we're able to provide a staff report at that point, we will. If not, we'll get it to you as soon as we complete that work.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think we're familiar with it enough that we don't need another staff report at this time. I think
Okay.
just getting us, eventually we will when
Sure.
it comes to a meeting, but I think in the interim, we're all familiar with this enough that just getting some updated wording or pictures or whatever it takes.
Okay.
to
Bullet
get
point
us-
list of the significant changes that were in the latest round.
Honestly, that helps with the timeline of getting things turned around out to you quicker than we're not spending that time doing our analysis and review, and you can be looking at it at the same time.
Okay, I think we have a plan.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Justin.
Bob, may I say one quick
Appreciate
thing
it.
before we leave this one?
Okay.
I just wanted to recognize Rachel Miller, who was a young person that sent a letter in to us, and I don't know if she's listening tonight. I don't think she's in the audience, but she's 17 and sent a letter in about how much she cares about the community. She enjoys this green space, and she's our youth and our future's voice, and I just wanted to commend her for taking the time to write. So thank you.
Okay, great. Item next on our agenda is the courtyards at Spring Mill PUD, item 2111-PUD-28. Dane?
Good evening, members of the Plan Commission. For the record, Dane Crabtree with the Community Development Department. The item before you this evening is the courtyards at Spring Mill PUD, a proposed rezone of approximately 67.8 acres of AGSF1 zone property located on the east side of Spring Mill Road, north of State Road 32, south of 186th Street. This petition received a public hearing at the November 1st, 2021 Plan Commission meeting, where density, site layout, and the existing airstrip to the east of the property were the primary concerns. Since the public hearing, the petitioner has reduced the maximum number of homes from 198 to 184. They have revised the site layout of the concept plan to show a more meandering, less grid pattern style of development. Additional enhanced rear architectural features have been added for perimeter lots, while garage and front building facade requirements for all lots have been added, and a 3-foot tall undulating mound has also been added as part of the external street frontage. This item is eligible for recommendation this evening. John Dobashewitz of Nelson and Frankenberger is present this evening to discuss the revisions. He is available for questions should you have any. Thank you.
Thank you. John?
Just one more minus. That'll be good, I think. Thank you. Good evening once, for the record, my name is John Dobashewitz, land use professional with the law firm of Nelson and Frankenberger. Platinum Properties Management Company and Epcon Westfield LLC are the petitioners, and present tonight is Brooks Longfellow with Epcon. Epcon's nationally recognized with more than 35 years of experience focusing exclusively on age-targeted and restricted sector of the housing market. As noted, the matter before you this evening is the courtyards at Spring Mill PUD and corresponding age-restricted empty nester residential community. That's a change that's been made from the original proposal, which was just targeted and didn't have a specific age restriction component, which is now part of the ordinance. This evening, the applicant's returning to the Planning Commission seeking a favorable recommendation on the courtyards at Spring Mill PUD. The subject real estate is now on display, and it consists of approximately 68 acres located on and adjacent to Spring Mill Road, north of State Road 32. So if I can get the pointer to work here. Yeah, let's try this one. That one doesn't work at all. Can I use the mouse? And I can direct with the mouse? Oh, thank you. This one's heavy duty. We'll figure it out here in a minute. Oh, wow, okay. There we go. Now I'm cooking. Now we're cooking with gas. There we go. State Road 32 to our south, commercial development to our south, Springmore Road position here, other residential neighborhoods approved on the Banis property, as well as to the south, Arbor Homes, Silverthorne Homes, and the Wheeler Landing PUD approved to our west. That's the Wheeler Landing space, and the airstrip along our east perimeter that I'll talk about in a minute. You can advance to the next slide. So there's several modifications that have been made to the plan since the last meeting based on comments that we received from the Plan Commission. Dane noted a couple of these, so they may be redundant, but the number of homes was reduced from by 14 to 184, and this was primarily a result of addressing comments about the grid style of development and eliminating that, as well as accommodating pond reconfiguration and separation from the property line to the east. Again, the age-restricted community standards were added to the PUD, not just targeted but restricted. And the concept plan was modified to eliminate the grid street pattern. Architectural enhancements were made. Numerous architectural enhancements were made. We patterned this off of the Epcon development at 151st in town. We were asked to take and add and layer in additional standards, which brought more closely, and I'll show you in a minute, the home elevations, but made sure exactly what we were presenting was closely tuned in to what is being proposed for development on this real estate. In addition, there were amenity enhancements and a timetable established. We'll go over that in a minute. And then we enhanced the buffers along Spring Mill Road with an undulating mound and four-board fence. So this perimeter, and I'll display it in more detail in a moment, there's a 30-foot landscape strip, and then there's a 20-foot rear yard setback. Well, this particular product, because it's all community and HOA maintained, there's nothing in that rear yard. The owner isn't permitted to build any improvements or anything in that 20 feet behind the dwelling. It's just a rear yard setback. So actually the setback or buffer there, because the lawnmower doesn't care whether you're mowing grass on the lot or mowing grass in the common area, they mow everything, is actually a 50-foot buffer when you take into consideration the 20-foot rear yard in addition to the 30-foot common area. However, all the landscaping that's attendant to the buffers and or street frontage is in common area, not on lots. And then there's also perimeter separation along this east line, and you'll see some dash lines here. And I've got some illustrations to show you in a minute. All these homes that are identified with a red dot, those are homes that wouldn't have an access door or a gate that would open into that space. And then the fence that's along this component here between those is actually going to be a 6-foot ornamental metal fence. So there's a solid fence along our entire east perimeter, and that's one of the provisions when we're adjacent to the airstrip to the east. The Plan Commission received a copy of that letter that the petitioner also received from NDOT that establishes and it goes over the FAA and NDOT requirements. I'll review those in a little greater detail in a moment. So the next slide, please. These are the home front elevations that are proposed. They're very porch forward designs. These are front loaded to the street. Just wanted to show you to remind you of the product that EPCON's building. And in that, their experience, while we previously reported to you that the homes are between 350 and 550,000, with an expected average sale price well over 450, their experience at the location at 151st in town has been in excess of that. We always want to report something that's more conservative to you, knowing that we don't want to come back ever and have to come back and say, well, it actually ended up being something different than what we reported. But their experience with all the amenities people are selecting, as well as the options, these are 1-story houses or maximum 1.5. A lot of owners are selecting that second half floor, finishing that out as additional bedroom and or bathroom for guests, and that's driving up the price north of, in some instances, as Brooks has indicated to me, north of $700,000 for some of the homes within that space along 151st and Town Road. The next slide, please. This is the open space and pedestrian connectivity. What I talked about, so there'll be a path constructed all along the east side of the road. There'll be internal sidewalks on both sides. There'll be a path that circles the pond to add and enhance access to that space for all residents. That fence, while it's not identified on this plan, would connect from over here, and all that trail would be on the non-airstrip side of that fence. You can see here where I described the darker green lines. Those are actually space on lots where there is no accessory house dwellings, there's no fences, there's no improvements. It would be the rear elevation of those homes, and it actually adds a little bit area more to the open space and buffer yards along those perimeters. There's a 40-foot buffer yard along this space, a 30 to 50-foot separation along our east perimeter. We're only providing a minimum 15-foot separation along our south edge because the buffer plantings and additional depth is provided by the commercial development to our south. Next slide, please. This is the amenity plan for the development. As I noted, the amenity clubhouse facility, which is detailed here, which will go central to the site, that and the amenities associated would be developed prior to the issuance of 80 building permits. Typically, you see that with 50% of the development. We're throttling it back to 80. It's fully anticipated that this is going to be under construction with the first phase of development. People want to see what they're buying, and one of the primary components for this demographic is this clubhouse facility, which would be a minimum of 2,500 square feet with restrooms, community room, outdoor fireplace, gathering space, swimming pool, of course, and other amenities which are outlined in the PUD. There are also additional small park spaces here. We've got photographs and other text requirements for those spaces. One concern was mentioned about the size of those spaces, and we do have in our ordinance that development shall be substantially compliant with the development plan. So what you see here is what we're going to come back with in terms of an overall development plan and primary plat. The next slide, please. This is that space along Spring Mill, where we had originally planned just for there to be a 4-board fence. So let's talk about this. This is the outside of a potential future lane to Spring Mill Road. We have to dedicate a 70-foot half, I believe. It may be 75. That's a considerable amount of space. So let's say this is the outside lane of a future 4-lane Spring Mill Road. Not that it's that situation today. We would have a tree lawn along that frontage. We would have a path, and then there would be the right-of-way. There'd be that 30-foot space before you get to a 20-foot rear yard. So we have a minimum of 50 feet between the right-of-way and the closest dwelling. And then within this 30-foot space, we would provide, in addition to a 4-board fence, in addition to the landscaping, a minimum 3-foot tall undulating mound. We met a couple weeks ago with a couple members of the council. They had asked, can we do that in a combination? So it wouldn't necessarily be a 4-board fence running just a straight line across that frontage. We're gonna come back with a design that's meaningful and has an interplay with the mounding, as well as landscaping across that frontage when you see the detailed development plan. But it is required, that fence design is required across the entire frontage. So again, here, the 20-foot rear yard, the 30-foot buffer area, backside of the right-of-way, 30-foot, 20-foot, and then there'll also be some drainage in that space. But again, mounding, landscaping, fence, all part of that plan. This helps illustrate that, what you might see from a bird's eye perspective looking due east into the site across that frontage. Again, there are architectural enhancements that aren't applicable to all structures, but just those along Spring Mill that would speak to roof designs, windows along that particular frontage. The next slide, please. So the last item that we wanted to make sure that we considered, and we spent a lot of time with this, Paul Rio, Platinum Properties, contacted NDOT, spoke to the individual at NDOT, and there are really 4 components to this process for development when you're in proximity to an airstrip. One would be with regard to barriers, and I talked about that with regard to the fencing that would be added. This is illustrative of a condition that might be those houses that are closest to that east perimeter. You wouldn't see any door openings. There would be a fence between the buildings like this that help create a space, which I'll show you in a minute. And then there would also be no gates along that perimeter. So that entire space along that 50 to 80 foot of space along that eastern property line would be restricted from access to the public. That's a barrier issue. They don't want animals and people wandering. Not that there's any, I don't believe that there's a fence in any vicinity of the airport or landing strip today, but that's something that we're gonna add. Setbacks, there's a minimum 150 foot setback from the center line of the runway before you get to a structure, so that the closest these homes would be 150 foot from the center line. There's also noise sensitive permitting that you have to go through. Once we have a detailed development plan and primary plat, we would share that with NDOT. We'd go through the process of identifying everything, all the extra layers that we, as well as other developers who have had residential in proximity to airstrips such as this, that noise sensitive space runs 1,500 feet either side of the runway, plus 2 nautical miles north and south. So there are other neighborhoods in our community today, both, that 2 nautical miles, that runs all the way up to 193rd roughly. So there's areas up north, including maybe a little segment of Osborne Trails, to the south of Meyer, where townhomes and single family or duplexes were constructed. Those 2 developments are examples of areas that fell into that space. And then tall structures regulations, which also are pretty similar to the noise sensitive permitting. But here again, we don't believe we have any issues with that because we're exclusively single story and story and a half dwellings, and we know what those regulations are. And those actually, there's a map that you have to put together and a process you have to go through, as Paul Rio has described it to me with NDOT, to show that you're meeting all these provisions, and they're confident that they can address the tall structures regulations because of the distance the houses are away from the airstrip as well as their height. So next slide. This last slide, I'm not sure we did enough at the last meeting to really give everyone an idea, and because this product isn't built. There's a neighborhood in Carmel. There's one on the west side that's yet to develop. When I say yet to develop, it's under development, and homes will be there later this year. These areas are homes, and the hatched area between the home, you would have an outdoor living space. So you would X out the side of your home, and the space between you and the next dwelling is all space for you to design and incorporate into your outdoor living space. So this is one home with a patio and this outdoor living space, and this is the next house immediately adjacent. All this space up to that dwelling, there's a side yard for that next door dwelling, but you have an easement on that property that allows you to design that space, and EPCON helps people spend lots of money on those areas. In some cases, $20,000 to $30,000 in that outdoor space with outdoor fireplaces and patios and other things, because it's really a feature that's unique to this EPCON product. So you might see it a little more clearly here. The gray is the house, the hatched area, this is their patio, the hatched area is their outdoor living space up to that wall of that adjacent dwelling, and these photos give you an idea of what folks do in those individual spaces adjacent to their dwelling. And we've got a flyover type of view here of what happens in those spaces. So you really design the area up to your wall. And that's all the information that we wanted to provide. We've worked diligently with staff to, and hopefully addressed all the comments that were provided by the Planning Commission. We did have a neighborhood meeting. You did receive 4 letters from the public, 3 of which are from adjacent owners, Mary Banis, who owns the space that Silverthorne's building in, and then 2 of the 4 owners, can you back to our original slide? 2 of the 4 owners to our north sent positive thoughts to the Plan Commission about their desire. That's, there's 6 lots here. 2 of the owners here who attended our neighborhood meeting also sent letters in support of the request. And of course, the letter from Mr. Wheeler tagging on the letter that we got from NDOT about that space, making sure that we provided evidence that we've addressed all those concerns and will continue to address those as we move forward. But tonight, we would respectfully request that the Plan Commission, after consideration of the adjustments that have been made, that you would consider forwarding a favorable recommendation onto the City Council regarding the PUD zoning request based on all the adjustments again. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner comments for John or staff?
Maybe it was just me. I was getting the old site layout when I was clicking the site exhibits. And if it was just me, okay, but if it was everybody else, we just need to make sure we get the. You were too? Okay. So then I relied on your presentation that you just went through that showed the new one, but the actual exhibit 6? I think it's exhibit 6 has the old stuff, so we just need to get that right.
That's the old layout.
That's the only one that was available earlier today.
No,
Well, it's on the,
It's on here,
on the,
yeah.
I've seen both.
It's on page 16 of the, yeah, of the red line version.
Right, so all the exhibits that we shared separately, we put them on individual pages. They're also exhibits to the PUD, but I acknowledge us just looking at it. I didn't go through and look at those exhibits to see if. which
Yeah, and I tend to just
version.
open them all in tabs, and I went, what, hang on a second, this hasn't changed at all, and then I saw that, I think it's just the old exhibit, it just needs to get cleaned up.
Yeah, so exhibit 6 would get replaced with the new, and. That's
No,
old,
that's-
that's old, that's the grid pattern, old plan, pond situated.
Yeah, there you go.
Haven't seen that either.
That's the new one.
Okay, got it.
Yeah,
I
I probably just mistakenly put up the old one.
I was
problem
ready to
was
gripe
in
about
the
it again
red
until I
line
saw the new
exhibit.
one.
If you go to the clean one, it has the right exhibit in it.
Yeah.
The red line
Yeah, I
exhibit is
think-
pretty confusing to look
Well,
at.
it
The
is
red line
because
has
when you replace
both.
exhibits, the
Well,
whole page
the
becomes a
Exhibit
line
site
through it,
exhibits
and
is the
a
old one.
there's like 45 pages of a red line, and
Right.
it's only 30 some odd pages with the
Right, and
updated
that's,
version.
I briefly had that same problem. I thought, let's skip trying to read this red line thing and try to go through the proposed real deal. So it is a little more clear, but
It-
I can understand.
Mr. Mount, if there are questions you have based upon the difference between the two, I can try to.
No, actually, I didn't have any questions, I just, when I first looked at it, red line and exhibits open a separate tab, I just want to make sure we're all looking at the right thing and that it gets produced, and I think the clean copy is right, so.
Yeah, we made our final couple tweaks was with regard to the berm and the fencing along the east perimeter, which we made with staff last week, which is reflected in the red line and ordinance that are attached to the agenda.
Actually, in lieu of any questions, I didn't have any, I'll just say, thank you for breaking up that grid, because it looks a lot better.
Thank you.
Any other commissioner comments?
First of all, Dane, is there any way you can bring up the courtyards of Westfield? I have it on mine, but I don't know how to get it on a screen. Yep. First of all, thank you for the changes. For me, number
January
one,
2021.
we're putting way too much residential in an area that I think our comp plan might call for more commercial. Yeah, Google courtyards of Westfield.
Yeah, I just mentioned to Kevin, I think it was January of '21 that it was approved by council, so if we go back and we look at that agenda, there might still be a link.
Yeah.
And if that was a question, the comprehensive plan identifies the space as residential. It actually further goes on to suggest that it would be higher density residential within the,
Okay. I
I
Language
think
thought
it
it was
actually calls for commercial there, John.
yeah, and the family sports district calls for numerous different items, including higher density residential.
Right, right, but it also calls for commercial. So it doesn't eliminate it. I mean, it calls for both.
Right, so
and
the sports campus thing did two things. I don't know if you can pull it up, but we went back and looked at it. It didn't, there was a map provided that suggested this might be what could be, and that wasn't part of the comprehensive plan. The space was outlined in a dashed line that included all the way down to State Road 32,
It was the
up Spring
marketing
Mill to
plan.
193rd and over. And through the language in the sports campus diagram, and staff notes this in their staff report,
Concept plan.
it speaks to many different uses, including higher in density or higher intensity residential uses as being
Well,
appropriate.
I guess my feeling is we have a whole lot of high-density residential up there. And I think we don't need any more. And I think commercial would be a better project next to an airway. When we did the comprehensive plan, we met with what's now Indianapolis Executive Airport, which used to be called Terry. And they wanted us to make sure that in our comp plan, anything that was close to them and abutted them was either commercial or very large lot residential, so that they didn't get complaints from the neighbors. So I am concerned about that.
That was relative to the executive airport?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, our comp plan.
Because they're
we
landing jets,
pulled them in.
they're landing jets out there, and I get that.
Right, well, even their touch and goes are a pain in the butt. I mean, every 5 minutes, the plane's going over your house. But anyway, they wanted us to protect their airport and make sure that we did not do any high-density residential, that we either did large lot residential or commercial. In the report from either the FAA or NDOT, I can't remember what, they talked about retention ponds not retaining water for more than 48 hours. But I'm not going to get in, I don't know how
And
you.
that's one option to satisfy the conditions the FAA have. There are other
Right.
options that exist, and we'll explore all of those.
Right, right, and I'm not going to get into that. I guess my biggest concern is that I think we have a lot of high-density residential up there. I would like to see more of a commercial base. And number two, if we did consider residential, I look at the Epcon product that's down off of Town Road, and I see a much nicer arrangement. To me, even though you have made some curves and things, this is just a bunch of lots packed in, back to back and side to side. So those are my two comments.
Thank you. Others have comments for staff? John, each other?
I do.
Cindy?
I've grappled with this one. The marketing plan that's included in our comp plan with that family sports park addendum or whatever it says. Over the years, it's funny because it seems like who's ever going to benefit from it uses that as what they're going to say is recommended for the area, but that was never formally included in any public forum that I'm aware of outside of that, here's the marketing plan, for Grand Park. So I'm torn because to me, this is a commercial site. It's got commercial to the south. It's got mostly commercial, and I'm talking, probably more of a corporate business park. I mean, this sizable area of commercial available to it. And we'd like our 186th Street corridor against Grand Park to be commercial. And so adding this residential product right here, it seems like a poor choice. But yet, I think that given a project, if it was probably somewhere else, I might appreciate it more. I'm not crazy about the way that they do feel packed into me.
You can take that down, Kevin, and give the original one, I think, for reference.
I don't think there's an awful lot of usable green space outside of the one main gathering area there. So anyway, I'm still torn about this one because again, I still feel like in that broader picture, having our commercial land available for commercial uses, in my mind, seems more appropriate. So, that's it.
I have been also very conflicted with this project because with the town road, EPCON, I appreciate it. I love it. I think it's great for Westfield. I very much so appreciate your presentation and all the changes. I still think that the layout, as it's already been mentioned, is a little cumbersome as opposed to what town road is. Again, I'm not opposed to the EPCON product. I'm excited for that to be at the town road and 151st one. But just speaking in terms of, and I don't think unique is the right term here, but just more so, A, the density, and also B, the use around Grand Park of, we, as it's already been mentioned by Dr. Kelleher, we have a lot of high-density uses in the area. And with this being on the opposite side of Spring Mill, again, that's where Grand Park comes into more play there. So I'm just very conflicted with this one.
Anyway, I just want to be clear that the comprehensive plan calls for this space to be residential, and the language in the Grand Park addendum calls for higher intensity residential uses. There's nothing in the Grand Park addendum or the comprehensive plan that identifies this parcel as commercial, whether that's office or retail. I know that's one of the reasons we were drawn, or Platinum and EPCON were drawn to this site as where it's an appropriate location for higher intensity residential, where it's immediately adjacent to other commercial uses. The commercial along 32, which is obviously part of the comprehensive plan, the residential that's to our east. Kevin may have shut it down, but I know staff identifies in their staff report that the density proposed here is actually less than the density of the town road site. And the town road site, the variety, if you will, of that layout is really predicated based on working around existing easements and the shape of the property. The shape of the property there is not convenient, as it's not a square. It's a lot different. And then there's also an easement that runs through that space, but the density here is less than the density on Town Road. And
John, I'm sorry, I don't think you're not telling the truth.
I don't want to question staff's review. I just know that they've identified in the report that there were 2.8 dwellings an acre at the courtyards at Westfield, and this is 2.7.
It sure looks crammed in.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons for that is that we don't live in plan view. We all, no pun intended, we're not flying past the property, viewing it from that angle. We're viewing it from Spring Mill Road or from, you won't see, if you look at the Town Road site, if somebody's driving down Town Road or driving down 151st Street, will not see a demonstrable difference between our plan and this plan because it's, in effect, the same. There are buffers along the perimeters with 4-board fence and lots that are adjacent to those. You're not going to experience from the adjacent roadways any of this. You'll never see those spaces.
I'm not concerned about the adjacent roadways. I'm concerned about the internal, the density internally for the people who might live there. I mean, the back-to-back, not along the roadways.
And that's one of the reasons we eliminated the grid pattern of the design that was, I think you had perhaps have mentioned that as part of the proposal.
Just to kind of go back and wrap up my thoughts a little bit, since mentioning the grid pattern, again, very much so appreciate that change. For me, when I'm thinking density, about 50% of the time, I'm going between the 2.7 number that you had mentioned versus over 180 lots. Because that's what people see and experience the most. They don't think of, oh, it's 2.7 per acre. They think, oh, that's over 180 homes. And again, another change that I very much so appreciate is going from age targeted to age restricted. It's just, as Cindy said, if this was in a different place or different area, different land in Westfield, I think I would definitely be leaning on the fence the other way on this one. It's just with this specific area, just really have to think very hard, what do we want to have here? So that's just my thoughts.
One of the other items, as an age-restricted community, it's eligible for TIF and doesn't produce kids. So as being an age-restricted community, this will contribute to the TIF that it sits under, and it won't produce any kids. So all the tax revenue that goes into the pool, if you will, is both contributing without school and a requisite result in school taxes or school use, and also contributes to the TIF that's been established for that space.
I have to speak up with the counterpoint here. I don't recall, I could be wrong on it, I don't think we talked about whether residential belongs here during the public hearing and our comment that night. I don't think we went into the commercial discussion. We could have, though. Did we do? Okay. To me, it does fit. I think this use works here based on the comp plan, and I may be in the minority, it sounds like, but I just wanted you to hear that point of it. It does seem like it works for me. And especially with the changes you made to get rid of that grid pattern that I didn't like last time and all that, so.
Yeah, we just didn't think going into it that we had to climb that hill. I mean, regarding the comprehensive plan, it was.
Thank you. Comments from?
I would just add, John, the changes, I appreciate the changes that you made. I like what you did with the
Undulating mound.
Yeah, mound along Spring Mill Road and incorporating the fence there too. I'm very excited with the idea that you've made it an age-restrictive community. I appreciate the way that you've changed the layout. You moved the ponds internally, gotten the big pond away from the side of the airport there. I like the fencing that you've added. And for me, this project would work in this area. So I like the Epcon product. I like what's going on over 156th Street, both from what it's going to look like and from the public's reaction to it. And I just think it's going to sell well here and it'll fit into the neighborhood. So I kind of like it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have anything, Dave?
Yeah, I would hate to lose any ground for potential commercial development and in its place put residential in it. But I think that the age-restricted issue is a game changer. I mean, that to me makes residential development as close to commercial as it can be in terms of its tax impact on the city. And it's obviously it's not commercial, but it's a lot better than age targeted, which should basically be a marketing scheme, not a marketing, that's a bad way to phrase that, a marketing plan, marketing approach versus something that they're mandated to do. And we can document and confirm that we're not going to have the burden of school kids and school support, or school burden rather, in there. And given the fact that it's that it appears to be in compliance with the comp plan, I think, I mean, it hadn't really even occurred to me that it would go commercial. So to me, given a pretty tricky site, we've got a great petitioner, a great product, and the type, it's age restricted. It's the type of thing that could be second homes for people that'll have a 2% cap instead of 1% anyway. So it's not that far off.
Yeah, one of the things, and we didn't introduce this to the Plan Commission, you bring up a good point, because it was really more the fiscal side of things. This is between a $70 and $80 million investment that I guess all the residents that buy here are going to make, and indirectly Epcon is going to make in our community that doesn't produce any kids and is eligible for TIF consideration as an age-restricted community. So we're bringing all the benefits, kind of, it's the best of both worlds. It's the walks and talks and pays taxes like commercial development as an age-restricted community and eligible for TIF consideration, where that's not always the case depending on what kind of commercial development would ultimately go there if it did. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt? Good? Kristin, please.
So I've looked up the sports addendum, and under the goals in this area, it says pursue economic development opportunities to capitalize on Westfield's already developing intergenerational sports niche. Examples include multiple championship quality sports facilities, complementary health, recreation, and technology-related land uses, supporting entertainment, dining, and lodging land uses, and other uses which would support and complement Westfield intergenerational sports initiatives. This addendum shall supersede the comprehensive plan. And this is the Family Sports Capital of America addendum to the Westfield, Washington Township Comprehensive Plan from the website. So this is what I'm looking at. So this is a land use decision for me. And I fear putting residential will breed more residential, and we're going to have a lot of high-density residential all around Grand Park. So my decision's not based on EPCON. I think they do a lovely product. We're excited to see what they do on Town Road and 146th Street. But based on this, I feel like this area should be commercial, so.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
I-
you're
I just-
welcome.
I mean, I'm,
That's
again,
all. I
we
just
didn't,
wanna
we
tell
didn't
you
know we
my
had this
thinking on this.
hill decline, but I'm reading from in addition to sports-related uses within the complex, it's anticipated that other related uses, quote-unquote, such land uses would likely include hotels, restaurants, healthcare, sports medicine facilities, professional offices, retail uses, higher density residential uses, and other supporting commercial uses, quote-unquote. I'm not saying you're wrong, I'm just saying I didn't know that the sports addendum, it didn't change the comprehensive plan. On the last page of the document, I think you're reading from, it just shows a dash line around all this space, and I think Cindy noted it. There's a diagram that's not part of the comprehensive plan, and then there's the addendum, and the addendum is words that you may have also read. I just read a section of the paragraph, and had we thought we had this hill to climb on arguing that this should be residential rather than commercial, we would have prepared differently.
That was part of my comments at the public hearing, John, was this land use issue of commercial versus residential, but I'm just one
I was just
commissioner,
speaking
so
to
I
defending
did-
ourselves against the comp plan.
That's okay, I just wanted to mention that I did bring it up at that time too, so thank you.
Thanks.
It is an area that's easy to get conflicted. I think all of us, at least from my perspective, and I agree that if we had the opportunity to have nice commercial here, that clearly would be what we want. I obviously had a hope that at some point maybe this would play off the airport. That's not practical, it's not happening. That was the only non-traditional use that I had referenced. There was some brief commercial discussion. Be that as it may, there's points to be made either way. So,
The one thing I do want to add, and because we already know that there's multifamily going in basically to the northeast of this, near that Kinsey Avenue, in the Wheeler PUD, that is going to be apartments. And so when I start looking at this project, and again, it goes back to the complexity of it, where I don't want to lose commercial ground, but then what's been approved around it and what this will involve in terms of not bringing kids into the schools and will give us that added incentive for the tax base is a positive. And so, again, that's why I'm conflicted. I likely will say yes today as a recommendation. I reserve the right to change my mind for council after I work out the other facets of it. But I want to bring up one little thing. You have a requirement that masonry must be used on front facade, but then it doesn't say how much. So, I mean, can you stick a brick on there and then it's compliant?
I'll give you a call before the end of the week, and figure out what the right language is to add to the ordinance.
Okay.
It would be a minimum masonry wainscot across the front, but I don't have a percentage. That would be beyond that.
It varies,
So, but we'll add a percentage that's somewhere between masonry wainscot and 50 or 60%. I want to look at the plans that they have before I give you a number, but we'll add that to we'll agree to add that provision to the ordinance that speaks to that before we go in front of the council.
That spring mill buffer is incredibly important to me for our streetscape there. And especially just given the way this is all going to play out, I appreciate you adding the berm. It's actually quite small. I wish it was taller because 3 feet doesn't get you that much when you look across a 3-foot buffer. But I don't think there was any shrubs in there.
The shrubs went out and the board fence went in. If you want to see additional shrubs, we'll come up with a consideration regarding the
I
additional shrubs.
definitely do. And again, I think that, and especially once trees grow up, it's going to be more of a buffer up high when where we need it is down low. So those shrubs are actually quite important.
So the ordinance would otherwise require 25 shrubs for every 100 feet. And I talked to Brooks and he said, well, let's add 15 in addition to what we've already committed to with the mounding and the board fence, that we would incorporate 15 shrubs every 100 feet. That doesn't mean a shrub every 7 feet. It means that we would group those in certain areas where perhaps in the lower area of the mound, we have it's going to be a 3 to 5 foot undulating mound. In the areas where it's 3 feet, we would add those shrubs as additional buffer in that space. And I just talked to Brooks as well. We're going to review to make sure this works, but 40% masonry on the front facade is the number that we just discussed. But I want to make sure that that works for the product that they have. That we don't make some unintended consequence was that's going to look weird with masonry versus not masonry.
Each of the 6 proposed homes appears to have ground level to bottom of window masonry when I enlarged and scanned around them. They each do have architecture that I would submit does support much greater use of masonry, which is probably appropriate in these houses, so that would be a welcome addition.
So, and perhaps we do it on a rolling basis to not exclude something that would be, everyone would agree, they would look at that and they said, that looks great, but we can't have that little masonry, we have to find some other space for masonry.
There are facade plane changes that could easily dictate a break in materials to masonry or something else, so.
So to be clear, we would seek the Plan Commission's recommendation tonight on 40% front masonry to be confirmed, and then 15 shrubs every 100 feet in addition to the style and undulation of the mound that we described.
Okay. Any other Plan Commission or comments before we
John,
ask if there is a recommendation?
sorry, Bob,
motion?
yes, I do have one question. Where do you see that this sports addendum says it's okay to have residential? I just can't find it.
There's actually addendum 1 and addendum 2. The paragraph I believe John is referring to is in addendum 2.
Okay.
It's a little further down.
Thanks, Mr. Okay. I have it here, but I don't know if there's any way I can show it.
That's a really, really lengthy document, but the two are together. I have a saved item to it. I believe it's.
I think the addendum 2 replaced and superseded addendum 1. Is that correct?
They're both in it. So it's around page 153, thereabouts, in the document you'll find online.
Yeah, this would only be like 15 pages.
And again, more of the question too, though, is how much have we already approved in terms of residential in this planning area? I know that the PUDs that are there have
Residential.
residential. I mean, how many overall units are we
Wheeler.
talking, and what is appropriate? I don't think we've ever had that discussion. And that's not for now, because we're in the middle of your petition, but I'm saying this is probably a workshop issue.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank
just-
you.
I would agree. I mean, I think there's been a lot of discussion and question about, well, the mayor challenges too, right? How much is enough here? And I don't know that we've answered that question as a community, so just be
And I
be
acknowledge
cautious
that.
when we're talking.
And I just know when I hear from folks in the community about development and development in the community, the typical comments are centered around how that impacts schools and the growth and development on schools. I'm not saying it's the only consideration, but it's the one I hear most often. And this isn't the neighborhood you're looking for if you want to have if you're concerned about impact on schools, because we pay the freight twice over with the age-restricted community, all the AV and none of the kids. So that should, I would believe, weigh heavily on a decision to consider whether or not it was an area where we wanted to restrict folks from moving to the community.
John, I'm not aware of this age-restricted, single-family owner-occupied product being typical. Are you, I mean, you know that,
typical,
in
Oh,
terms of.
TIFable.
it is.
Sorry, yeah,
It is.
TIFable,
It
TIF area.
it
You can
qualifies.
you can divert the revenue, the tax revenue from that to the TIF.
There's a neighborhood in Carmel that's under development, that's under the same scenario, and they're using those, the TIF proceeds to finance additional road improvements in the vicinity.
Okay, it's just something we're not familiar with here. We have not done that. We only have
It's new
commercial.
ground for us.
We're gonna ask the council to make sure they're aware of it.
Well,
because
that's
I'm sure
something
that-
I would like answers to ensure that that actually is the case.
we'll-
Because
we'll
it does impact my decision.
We'll provide you all
for
the
that.
evidence that we can in advance of adoption consideration.
Thank you.
In the Grand Park area in general, I was conflicted as we started looking at a lot of the development proposals that came through. The apartments I had some misgivings with, but agreed that some population is probably necessary there for the success of the commercial, because the Grand Park is a seasonal endeavor. So while it's going to be something that we would hope would help make that commercial successful, it's not going to be uniquely successful because of that alone. So I kind of can agree that there's something necessary. This is not a parcel with a use that we're talking about today that quite fits that same mold, but having not raised previous objections and see how the support could come from our own documents to agree with it. I'm not suggesting we have to tank it and start over again, but I think we do need to be very careful as a community moving forward in how we manage the rest of this. There's a lot of ground still yet to be seeking whatever the development's going to be. When Osborne Trails came along, that was the kind of thing that we viewed as a benefit, and that was clearly not a commercial future location, but the benefit of having that kind of a population near Grand Park for the volunteer opportunities that likely come with that demographic. Maybe there's more here. It's a little bit longer walk, but perhaps it'll all work to the benefit if it all eventually does come to pass. So if we haven't roughed up John enough, is there anybody that would like to propose with John's two mid-meeting additions here a motion on this?
I'm sorry, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I can't bite my tongue on this one because, so I mean, just going back to what you said with having the volunteers, I mean, we get plenty of volunteers from all around our community to go out to Grand Park, so I don't think the vicinity has anything to do with it. When, again, just looking at this area specifically, and this wasn't my issue coming into tonight. Coming in tonight was, as it tends to be, the density. And I appreciate you pointing out it's about the same as over on Town Road. It's just, again, for me, over 180 houses, you know. But you sweeten the pot when you mentioned that is now a completely age-restricted as opposed to age-targeted. But as I listen to my fellow commissioners, it's just like, yeah, we have so much residential around Grand Park. We have missed so many opportunities when it comes to providing the families, the 1 million+ visitors that come to Grand Park, the opportunity to go shop or go eat or just all these other tax-based related issues that would be such a benefit to around Grand Park. We have residential to the south, to the west, to the north. Really, the only spot that hasn't been residential because the Grand Millennium and the entertainment complex was approved, crossing fingers as that happens, was to the east. Again, this wasn't the biggest issue coming in tonight, but it's just, I see that this is two land parcels. So, I would love to be able to compromise and say, hey, the southern parcel, sure, let's put this product in here because I love the product. But on the northern half, hey, again, let's meet in the middle. Let's have an area where we can have restaurants, or we can have a little industrial park, or not industrial park, that's not our term, but business park that can service Grand Park and just the visitors that come out. I don't want to continue to be the dead horse, but it's just there's so many issues that we are not addressing. I appreciate the product. I love that it's age restricted, but just this area, if it was somewhere else, 100%. Just this area, extremely conflicted.
So one of the things we need to keep in mind when we're, as a community, reviewing these things, commercial needs residential within close proximity in order for it to work. That's not a conversation we've really had as a community either. What are those numbers? What are those ratios? What's enough? We don't know. So I just think we need to be careful when we're talking about this, that we've got too much, or it's too dense, or whatever. I don't know that we know that in order to support the desired commercial that we all say we want.
Please.
I'd like to make a motion to approve 2111-B-28 Courtyards and Spring Lane PUD District. Favorable recommendation.
With the additional commitments from,
The two additions, is it 40% masonry on the front of the buildings and 15 plantings per 100
15 shrubs per every 100 linear feet.
of the
Can we make it so the condition for the masonry is, may not be 40% specifically, but is simply to be added as a percentage at the time of council approval in case that either increases or decreases?
we have a,
It does. I think we can get there. I don't have an answer tonight, and I don't want to come back next month to answer that question unless it's deemed absolutely necessary.
I'll second that motion.
thank you. It's been moved by Mike John, seconded by Andre Maui, opposite ends of the dais here. Or bookended. Will staff please call the roll?
Mr. Maui,
Yes.
Mr. McCarty,
No.
Mr. Schmitz,
Yes.
Ms. Poljer,
Yes.
Ms. Berkman,
No.
Mr. Deck,
Yes.
Mr. Horkay,
Yes.
Mr. Johns, Dr. Kelleher.
No.
Motion carries 6-3.
Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you.
No, I'm done.
All right. We have 3 public hearings also on our agenda this evening. First being Ditch Road Fire Station, petition 2201-ODP-01 and 2201-SPP-01. Is Caleb on the call, or who is going to present?
Yep, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
All right. Good evening, members of the commission. For the record, Caleb Ernest with the Community Development Department. This proposal is for the overall development plan and primary plat review of 2 lots and a 36,530 square foot fire station on approximately just under 31 acres in the Maple Knoll PUD district. This project is located at 17001 Ditch Road. It's south of the Maple Glen Elementary School and south of 171st Street. This item is up for public hearing tonight. It has been properly noticed and advertised, and staff has received no public comments. Matt Oman of RQAW Corporation is here virtually representing the project. Jim Roberts is also here on behalf of Rob Gaylor, and Matt plans on speaking a few words tonight. Him and Jim, as well as myself, are all available for questions. So do you have any? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Matt Owen with RQAW. Could you go to the site plan slide, please? This is actually, I guess, the landscape plan. Hold on there.
You may scroll down on the site plan. There's more than one page on that exhibit.
Yeah, do you have the next one down? That one, please. This is the, again, proposed site plan for the new fire station. Just a couple items I wanted to clarify is that we're showing a couple entrances and parking lots, and then the parking lot to the north off of Ditch Road would be for administrative and public use only, and then the drive to the south would be for the fire truck and emergency truck and apparatus equipment, as well as access to the lot to the east, which would be for the firefighting staff, and overflow parking when they do various training at the site. Is it anticipated that it'll be between 11 and 12 firefighters there each day? Could be up to 17 with 10 administrative staff during business hours. And again, this is an allowed use within this, the Maple Knoll district. And as staff noted, we are also asking for the, preparing a primary plat that would separate this into roughly 5.1 acre lot. And then the remainder would be the block A. And this site is currently owned by the city of Westfield and is known as Osborne Park. And we're here to answer any questions you may have regarding the site and the project.
You're complete?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. This item does require a public hearing. I don't recall, I believe you probably mentioned at the beginning that comments from virtual attendees need to be emailed to planners@westfield.in.gov. So now's the time, if you haven't already sent one and choose to, type quickly, please. I will open the public hearing at 8:52. Do we have any cards for those present?
We do not for this petition.
All right, well, we will wait for the computer clock to flip over to 8:55 or 8:54. It's now 8:53. And see if anybody's typing us a comment.
We have no virtual communication.
Still none. Okay. I will close the public hearing at 8:54. Are there plan commissioner questions or comments for petitioner or staff?
Bob, I have a question. Oh, thank you.
Please.
So I think the west side desperately needs a fire station, so I am pleased that we're moving that direction. I believe that this land was earmarked as a park in our parks plan. So I have a question regarding, are you going to do a park similar to the setup that we have on 32 with that fire station? Or are we going to make other plans to earmark other land on the west side, which is desperately short of parkland already, somewhere else?
Is that directed to
Um,
Kevin? I'm not sure that there is a plan that I have ever heard of for this park. Maybe we defer to the council representatives. Are you either fluent on anything in a master plan for parks futures about use of this land in some formalized way?
Still working on that one. We're going to be updating, or should be at least, our park master plan this year. I think it's due. That's about all I know.
I agree.
Just as being land held for that, but I don't think they ever got very far with any kind of plans. There was a dog park effort for a while, and there was other things that were
There's a lot of
maybe
interest in it.
discussed, but it's never gone very far. I think there's some limitations based on its location with the roadways around it and it's just flat farm ground. So I don't know that I don't remember seeing anything go very far with planning.
Yeah,
No.
nor do I. I think it's more land banked, and the park that's adjacent to the current main fire station really wasn't anything that was done in conjunction with that development. That came along long after that station. So I'm not sure how.
Are we going to go ahead and use that land for that? Or I guess I just don't know who's looking into this.
Well,
I
it sounds
think
like it's,
Well, we'll have to probably get more information from Jeremy and Chris with
Okay.
Public Works and Parks for more information.
Because
Okay.
I think
This
Chris
is
has it
31
on the
acres.
parks master plan as
He
a
does.
park.
Yeah.
Right, so
it has a name.
it has a name?
I mean, this
Yes.
is only
Okay,
5.
so
But
it
in
is-
terms of its,
Five
you know,
acres, right.
further
That parcel's
development,
31 acres.
more than just what
There's
it
a
is,
significant
you know,
amount that's
right
being
now.
done.
I think
that
the
is-
answer is TBD.
Yes.
I don't have any problem with the fire station. I think we need it. It'll be closer to me, which is a good thing, although I don't plan on burning down.
Nobody ever does.
But
most part.
we are low on parkland, and once land is gone, it's gone. So I hope that we can at least, if we do nothing else other than land bank this, I hope we
Yeah,
can
sure.
keep it in our parks inventory.
Yeah. It's-
Also, keep in mind, this is a plat request. This is not a land use discussion, but this is a permitted use in this zoning district. So just procedurally, keep that in mind.
All right. There's no further commissioner comments. Then we've completed the public hearing, and this will move on. Our next, do we have a comment now? For the next one? Okay, let's say the public hearing is closed. Next public hearing is
Is this a
Osborne.
public hearing only, or was there a vote being requested also?
Not on this one.
No, I'm
Just
talking
a-
about the fire
on
station.
Osborne
You do water.
Trails was identified as action potential.
Pickleball courts.
So Osborne Trails PUD Amendment 3, 2201-PUD-01 is now in front of us. Is Rachel still on the call?
I am, thank you.
Very good.
For the record, Rachel Remmenschneider with the Community Development Department. This is an amendment to the Osborne Trails PUD, which was originally adopted by council in February of 2017. The property is approximately 13 acres at 10 East 191st Street. This is the West Fork Whiskey property. This item was introduced at the December 13th City Council meeting and is asking for both its public hearing and its recommendation this evening. It has been properly noticed and advertised, and staff has not received any public comments. The petitioner held a neighbor meeting on Thursday, January 13th, the notes for which are in your exhibits. Chris Wilkes from Holiday Properties is here tonight to make a brief presentation. He is available for questions, as am I, if there are any for staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wilkes?
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. President, members of the commission. Thank you for opportunity to present to you tonight. Again, for the record, my name is Chris Wilkes with Holiday Properties, address of 231 South College Avenue in Indianapolis. As mentioned, this is for the West Fork Whiskey Distillery Project. It is governed by the Osborne Trails PUD, and we're here to talk to you about a monument sign and wayfinding and directional signage. In the PUD, it references, for both those type of signs, it references the UDO. So if you look at the text of the UDO, and I've got it here, it states, monument signs shall incorporate a sign base consisting of masonry materials. More importantly, it goes on to say masonry materials shall complement the color and texture of materials used in the front building facade of the lot's buildings. And so if you look at the structure, the color palette, the type of materials used in our building, in our opinion, masonry does not complement the building as the text of the UDO or it desires. And so what we are requesting here is simply a concrete base, as you see there, right here. And so you can see the gray color palette is more compatible with the structure of the design. So that's we're requesting an amendment of the PUD to specifically allow this sign. It doesn't allow deviate from the UDO in the balance of the Osborne Trails, but just on this site. And then furthermore, in the wayfinding, we'll have two signs on Horton Road. If you can go maybe to the site plan, Kevin. Right there, thank you. We'll have this will be the main parking lot, so we'll want to direct patrons into this parking lot and then shipping and receiving up here. So while Horton Road is anticipated, or will be replaced one day with this new roundabout, right now we'll be operating off of Horton Road. And the UDO for those type of signs prescribes signs that are very small. I think it's 2 square feet. So it's like 1 foot by 2. So what we're requesting here is a wayfinding signs that would be 5 feet by 2 feet by 2 feet, 6 inches by 5 feet. And furthermore, the UDO prescribes a maximum height of 3 feet, and our signs as referenced in this exhibit. Kevin, if you could go back there. Again, this will be outlined in the amendment here, but these are the signs that will be allowed via this PUD amendment. So that is it. As Kevin, I think, mentioned, or I'm sorry, Rachel mentioned, we would respectfully request approval, and from tonight's public hearing, a recommendation to council from this meeting. So thank you. Any questions? I'll be here.
Okay, thank you. I'll open a public hearing at 9:03 p.m. Do we have any cards?
We have no cards for this petition and no virtual communication yet.
Okay, to virtual attendees, another reminder, if you care to comment, planners@westfield.in.gov.
No public comments.
Okay, we'll give our typists, potential typists, till 9:05, which I think is only like another 15 or so seconds. In case they type like I do. All right, it is 9:05. Public hearing is closed. Do we have commissioner questions or comments for the petitioner or staff? Jenny?
My only comment is I think this goes with your facade much better than brick.
Thank you. We agree.
So, we have the signage ordinances obviously for good reason, and then we entertain deviation from that for good reason as well.
Yes,
As
right.
just pointed out, I think that main sign does go a lot better, and it makes sense. I don't know that we have the same good reason for the other,
The wayfinding?
the wayfinding signs to increase the size that much. I guess it doesn't bother me too much, but I'm curious for everybody else. That's not so much a style thing, it's just making them bigger. Does everybody feel
Well-
that that's appropriate before we start setting a precedent in that direction?
Me personally, it kind of jumped out at me, yeah. Is a little bit big for a entrance or a,
Well, again, we're talking, 5 feet tall from the ground and 5 feet by nearly 3 feet. I think really it's a visibility thing. I mean, you're trying to direct traffic safely into a area of commerce, and so if you look at the UDO, it is 2 square feet maximum, so it's 1 foot by 2. That's, I would argue that's not very visible.
Yeah, and you could probably tell from my tone, I don't even know that I strongly object, I'm just not quite sure. I was curious what everybody else
Yeah.
thinks.
the 1 foot by 2 is the sign surface itself, Kevin? That doesn't include how high it is from the ground, it's just the actual sign surface.
That's correct.
So 1 by 2, I agree, that seems small.
Right.
But 5 by 2 seems bigger. And the height that it has to be in our ordinance is what, you said 3 feet or 5 feet?
I believe it's 3,
I think, yeah, 3, and we're going to 5.
but,
It feels like the ordinance, that requirement is too small.
yeah.
Yeah.
It feels
I
like this
agree with
might
that.
be a little bit bigger than it needs to be, so that's where I am.
Right, it seems like these wayfinding signs by ordinance are gonna be barely the size of speed limit signs. And road signs are a lot bigger than they look when you actually stop and get up close and personal with
Yeah.
them. I mean, this is smaller than a stop sign, definitely, is
A-
what
And I guess,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I'm sorry.
is, I mean, the 1 foot by 2 foot is less than a typical 8-sided stop sign.
Yeah.
So I mean, we
Right.
really probably erred, it seems, in this particular context discussion right now in specifying that size.
So-
I'm not sure 2.5 by 5 is really overly large from
No,
the driver's seat of a car passing by it, which should only be at
right,
minimal speed, but still.
right.
So here's my question. You have West Fork Whiskey, which is, you want to be visible, but then the other half of the sign has nothing on it except some very, very small letters. So is that really necessary? I mean, it just,
Well, I think this would be, like, for instance, deliveries here versus the other sign would have, customer
entrance.
parking. So I'm not sure
yeah, I
what
mean, I
those.
can't even see what it says
Well,
there if I'm driving by, so.
I don't know. I acknowledge, I'm not sure what that is. So I didn't pick that up when we were,
In blowing up the drawings that we had on the agenda, one says main entrance, the
Main
other says,
entrance,
the
yeah.
other says deliveries.
okay. I would argue that main entrance, it needs to be larger. So I would,
it
Well,
just
and
seems-
I would have, if I had been able to see that, I would have noticed it and I would have come up with a better exhibit. But it's so small, it's indecipherable to even myself, so.
And there may be font issues on machines, because I know the screen I'm looking at, it's small, but it's not that small. I
Okay.
don't know what everybody else sees with that.
And main entrance in the square West Fork Whiskey Company logo that matches the building probably could fit on a sign that was 3 by 2.5, or 2.5 wide, 3 high. Main entrance on one, delivery on the other. I mean, there does seem to be a lot of empty space that's not being used for copies, so does it really need to be that big?
Does this get softened with, like, are there shrubs around the posts or anything, or is it just stark the way we see it?
We haven't even probably gotten to that level of details, but if, we'd be happy to, everything else that governs signs would remain the same, so if it
And there are
required-
landscape requirements, because as we were vetting
Yeah.
the
Not for
agenda,
this sign type, there's not, and I
or
also
for the
came to-
wayfindings, no, but for the monuments.
For the monument, yes, there
Right.
Where
are,
I was concerned about just looking at raw concrete, even though it matches the
Yeah.
building, we need some
yep.
green stuff there, and that will be
It's
required.
required to be
This, not
landscape.
so much.
If we could go back to the site plan, Kevin, one thing to consider also too is, I'm sorry, go back up, Kevin. While Horton Road runs immediately adjacent to this site now, you have to recognize Horton Road will be realigned with this roundabout, and likewise, 191st Street will be realigned here. Our driveways will get reconnected, both the shipping and receiving and the main entrance here as with part of that project. But frankly, your carts are going to be kind of at an angle with regard to this project in the future. So I would just request respectfully that if 2 feet by 6 and 5 can be accepted, I think it'll help us in the future versus having to come back and say, we have customers missing us because they're now arcing up and away from us, so.
In this area specifically, because again, we're getting 1 million plus visitors a year, we need visible signage.
Yes.
And the metal sign that is mainly being in question here, that is uniform to the signs that are already out there. So you want to get visitors accustomed to a certain type of signage. And then when it comes to the other one, aesthetically, it fits the building. I love it. Looks awesome. So that's just my thoughts with the other one. If we're going to have signage, let's have signage that fits what is already in the area and is visible for all of our visitors.
So I raised the question that was on my mind. I wanted to hear everybody's thoughts. I've heard a few. I don't know if everybody else has any on it, but having stirred that pot, it's not a big concern to mine. I'm okay with it.
Great, thank you.
Is there a motion that somebody would like to offer now?
Go ahead and make a favorable recommendation to move this on to council.
We have a motion from Victor McCarty to send a favorable recommendation.
Can
I'll
second, or Jenny can.
Go ahead, you can.
Kristen will
Kristen will
give,
do it. She
will
got
give
it.
you, yeah, I think you were
I
winning
wrote
there.
Kristen, so.
Yep. That's right.
All right. Moved and seconded by Commissioners McCarty and Berkman. Will staff please call the roll?
Mr. Schmitz?
Yes.
Ms. Boljeric?
Yes.
Ms. Berkman?
Yes,
Mr. Deck?
Yes.
Mr. Horke?
Yes.
Mr. Johns?
Yes.
Dr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Mr. Maui?
Yes.
Mr. McCarty?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Members of the commission, thank you very much.
Thank you. Last public hearing is Del Canto PUD 2201-PUD-02. Once again, a reminder before we get cranking, if there is anybody in the virtual world attending that has comments, planners@westfield.in.gov for when we get to the public hearing in a little bit.
Good evening, members of the Plan Commission. For the record, Dane Crabtree with the Community Development Department. The item before you this evening is the Bel Canto PUD, a proposed rezone of approximately 23 acres of GBPD, General Business Plan Development Zone property located on the east side of US Highway 31, south of David Brown Drive. The proposal would leave the David Brown Drive frontage of the property available for commercial development, while a 6-building multifamily project containing a maximum of 300 dwelling units is proposed south of the existing Roush Auto dealership. This area is located in the employment corridor of the comprehensive plan. This section states that these corridors should be reserved for employment-generating uses and related supporting services, including large-scale employment-intensive office uses. A neighborhood meeting was held on January 5th, 2022 at the Hampton Inn. A summary of this meeting can be seen in Exhibit 10. This petition is scheduled for a public hearing this evening. It has been properly noticed and advertised. The department has received multiple public comments via email, which have been made a part of the public comment exhibit this evening. One that was received after 5 p.m. was forwarded to you earlier this evening. John Dabashewitz of Nelson Frankenberger is present this evening to make a presentation and is available for questions should you have any. Thank you.
Thank you. John, go ahead and proceed.
Thank you and good evening again. For the record, John Dabashewitz, land use professional with the law firm Nelson and Frankenberger. We represent the petitioner, Belcanto Asset Growth Fund LLC, and present tonight on behalf of the petitioner, Sandy Avery, of Belcanto's development team. Also with us is Bill Butts, the project engineer, and other members of the development team. We're here this evening to present the Belcanto PUD, which is a request to permit multifamily development and commercial uses on the real estate and obtain feedback from the Public and Plan Commission as consideration of the project is reviewed. As staff indicated, the real estate is approximately 23 acres in size. It's illustrated on the image on display. We are south of and adjacent to David Brown Drive. To the immediate west is the Tom Roush car dealership. To the immediate south is the Woodside Estates neighborhood. And to the immediate east and south of the site are the Hamilton Square and Valley Farms apartment communities. Currently, the site is zoned GB plan development, and the rezone request seeks approval of the Belcanto PUD, which will be a mixed-use development consisting of multifamily apartment component and the commercial outparcel adjacent to David Brown Drive. If you can advance one, Kevin, please. And one, well, let's leave it here. This next exhibit is the concept plan for the development. You can see adjacent to David Brown is the location of the commercial outlot. Sandy has advised me that Belcanto has been in serious discussions with the Lions Club for the commercial outparcel, and they hope to come to terms with them soon. They have a verbal agreement to purchase the real estate, the Daz Club does, as well as a verbal agreement from Belcanto to sell them the property as they move forward. The road design of 120 feet right-of-way width, the site was designed based on direction from the city engineer in conformance with the requirements of the thoroughfare plan. If development proceeds, Belcanto would construct portions of Westfield Boulevard extension to and including their site, as well as dedication of right-of-way based on a development agreement they would reach with the city for construction of the amended roadway. So can we go back one real quick, Kevin? So get everybody on the same page, Public and Plan Commission. This is Westfield Boulevard today. It terminates up here, not terminates, but it goes to Park Street and then up to the roundabout across from the hospital at State Road 32, and it's built to this section today. The city's thoroughfare plan calls for that roadway to cross the subject parcel, run parallel adjacent to generally US 31, across lot or lots within Woodside Estates, and then connect up with the development to the south, Lantern Commons, where it's been designed through that site, and then becomes Union Street. So Union Street tees into this new roadway just north of 161st Street. It comes through the site here, hugs the neighborhood side and turns up north, comes up through the site. So that 120-foot right-of-way that you see that clips the corner of the Roush dealership is directed based upon the thoroughfare plan and information that we received from the city engineer. The future extension may occur to the south through Woodside Estates to connect it to Lantern Commons. That would be at the discretion of the city and future development interests they have. So again, there's 4 lots here within Woodside that my understanding are owned by one owner, the owner of the home that sits here. That's where that road would cross. I can tell you the prescribed thoroughfare width, which is 120 feet. I can't tell you where it's going to go, but there'll be a point A and a point B, regardless of the type and style of development on this real estate, but as defined in Lantern Commons to the south, and that segment would be at the discretion of the city at some point moving forward. You'll see the apartment buildings are, if we can advance back to that, let's go one more slide. There we go. You can see that the apartment buildings are facing to the west, so the parking fields are positioned behind the buildings, away from visibility of US 31. So these are the apartment buildings. The parking field would be to the back and removed from visibility. Visibility from 31 would be of the building frontages and the commercial out parcel here. Potential access into the Tom Roush dealership here and here. This dashed line represents an existing detention facility that would be relocated with the realignment of the Westfield Boulevard extension. The community amenity clubhouse and pool facility is positioned internal to the site, located right here, and will be designed to complement the quality and architecture of the apartment buildings. If you can advance one, Kevin. This next exhibit is a perspective rendering and elevation of the proposed apartment buildings. The buildings, as shown from their appearance, would be from US 31. So the top image is a perspective, generally northbound on a US 31 looking into the site. This is a front-on elevation of the same building. Well, buildings would be 4 stories in height with a more corporate design theme. It has been Belcanto's experience that this type of building design, along with the high-quality interior finishes, floor plans, and other full-service community amenity offerings, makes this type of apartment community appealing. These are very well-designed buildings that avoid the typical residential-appearing apartment buildings. Each apartment building is served by elevators, interior corridor entrances and exits, and select units have private garages that are integral to the building design. If you can go to the next slide, please. These photos represent the character of the proposed apartment units. Belcanto's vision for the site is to cater to the type of resident who is seeking higher quality interior finishes and layouts with high quality state-of-the-art technology and architectural design. To this end, apartment units are generously sized with open living plans, dressing suites in all master bedrooms, expanded balcony spaces, and defined work areas within each unit that can be used as a home office. The next slide, please. This exhibit assists in reviewing the building height as it relates to the south property line shared with Woodside Estates. We're reviewing this exhibit at this time, as when we had our neighborhood meeting, there were questions regarding building heights and visibility. One item to note is that under the current zoning, significantly taller buildings under that GBPD provision are permitted by right closer to the Woodside Estates neighborhood. As many as 7 or 8-story office structures could be located 45 feet removed from the property line as a point of reference. So what we provided here, it's more difficult to see on the site plan, but the building that we've positioned here is approximately 150 feet away from the property line. That's represented here by a 4-story residential structure that's approximately 46 feet in height. This just illustrates what you would see if a single-family dwelling were positioned 20 feet from that's the required rear setback under residential. It's not zone residential today, it's on business. But in essence, from the shared property line, if you were to remove the site 45 feet north, which is approximately this dimension, you would be permitted by right today under the GB zoning as tall as a 7 or 8-story building, which would be positioned next to the neighborhood. I think that's critical, and we'll review that as we move forward, because we've reviewed all the comments that you've received to date, absent the one that came after 5 o'clock today. And a lot of the comments stemmed from not preferring this development, and then it was because, and the because was items such as traffic, tranquility, privacy, preserving the wooded area for the environment, and all those things today under the existing ordinance under GBPD it not only doesn't require tree preservation, but it actually works against you, because this area where we're proposing to preserve 20 feet of tree preservation area within the scenario of a 40-foot building setback, there would be a 40-foot buffer, but the UDO says within that 40-foot buffer, this isn't coming back to the council, the Plan Commission Council asking for discretion, this is filing a development plan and saying, does it comply or not? Within that 45-foot space, there would be drainage accommodations, and then there would have to be a mound, because the ordinance requires it. Well, a mound requires you to remove the existing trees, and would require us to remove almost all the existing trees from the property line in to accommodate the mound. So I stop and make that point because I think a lot of the comments that have been provided to the Plan Commission from the public are stem from what's there today versus what's being proposed, rather than an analysis of what's permitted there by right today and has been for 30-plus odd years. I didn't go back and do the research as to determine when it was zoned GBPD. But the type and style of development that is permitted and authorized by right is much more intrusive, in my view and in Belcanto's view, for the neighborhood to the south than the proposed structures, which would be further removed from that shared property line with more landscaping in between those and shorter building heights than under the current zone condition. The next slide, please. These next few slides are supplemental and they relate to open space and amenities. Along with the extension of the roadway would come the extension of the asphalt path, similar to what you see north of David Brown along the side of Westfield Boulevard. There would be internal site circulation that circulated all the different amenities, including the clubhouse, dog park. This is dry detention area, as well as an additional park space between the buildings here. You can go to the next slide, Kevin. This, in addition, is just outlining some of the different amenities. Community outdoor activity space, a path around the proposed pond that would be in this vicinity. The clubhouse, as identified here, would include a pool, as well as numerous other amenities as articulated in the ordinance. There would be another outdoor activity space central to the location. The next slide, please. These are photographs of the intended quality and character of outside spaces. This is the pool facility, outdoor meeting spaces and gathering spaces, play courts that would be outside. The next slide. And these are examples of the character and quality of the clubhouse facility, which would include athletic training facility, as well as meeting space for use by residents, office space that they could use for meetings that runs in tandem to the whole concept of providing office space within it, dedicated office space within individual units. They could use this space for meetings that they might have associated with their business. The next slide. So in conclusion, Belcanto looks forward to receiving feedback from the Plan Commission. Belcanto understands that they are seeking a trade-off from potentially high-intensity commercial office uses for residential, and hope to advance the critical segment of Westfield Boulevard, that corridor, which is proposed with this development that is compatible with, again, this development is compatible with office development and strikes a balance with the existing authorized surrounding uses and developments. One point I'll make, I know Dane reviewed with you the comprehensive plan for that space. If you go back to the first slide. There was a map up earlier with one of the other items that showed that the 31 corridor, which is the employment node, runs like 1,600 feet. It includes portions of ground that's even on the other side of Union Street and runs up, generally up Union Street, all the way up until you get to 32, which it calls downtown. And in that space, there have been other locations approved for multifamily development, including north of David Brown here. And I apologize because I don't have committed to memory the name of that development. But Lantern Commons to our south has multifamily development incorporated within it, both within spaces where the Plan Commission took consideration of multifamily being a component of development in that space. And then multifamily exists to our east perimeter with Hamilton Square and Valley Farms being directly adjacent to. So we think we can strike a balance here between meeting the architectural and development considerations of the US 31 corridor in a space that we feel like this use is more consistent with and protects the surrounding owners, in particular with regard to those folks who live in Woodside Estates, and comments that were made earlier this evening about development on the east side. We actually have proposal here for buildings which are shorter than further setback from the right-of-way and incorporate more landscaping than would otherwise be incorporated into development, again, which is by right. And I know a lot of times, I'll make the point again, people don't review zoning proposals for what's permitted by right today versus what's proposed. They review it for what's there today, and today there's a woods there, and not the existing development. So with that, I'll conclude. Be glad to address any questions that you may have, and we appreciate your time tonight and anticipate a lot of feedback. After tonight's meeting, I know that there was a mention of a committee process or some alternate plan other than dais and podium, and we would be interested in having that discussion with the Plan Commission if it's vetted out between Plan Commission and staff on how to arrange that and set it up and continue for additional dialogue if the Plan Commission felt like that dialogue would be productive. So thanks for your time this evening.
Thank you. The item does require a public hearing, which I will open at 9:30. Do we have any cards?
We do. Paul Porter. In addition, I'll just note that there was a email that forwarded to you during the presentation from a Rebecca Gapinski, so hopefully you all received that.
Thank you.
How are you? I'm Paul Porter. I reside at 1502 Woodside Drive. My wife, Angela Gapinski. We're here to voice some concerns regarding this property as it relates to our property. Also some concerns on the whole about Westfield and how much development is going on, particularly around us at Woodside Estates. There's already Lantern Commons below us. Tonight we discussed the spring water and then this, so that's quite a amount of development for one community to absorb all at one time if this goes, if this goes through. Also have concerns about whether the city is declaring eminent domain on this gentleman's house to the left of us, or whether it be privately purchased. Excuse me, and a couple more here. We have concerns over the amount of traffic and the impact that all of this, one, the construction phases of all this, will be forced to live with several years of construction in a complete circle around us. And then, excuse me, the school system, this is going to be a high-density development. The apartments will be, so that's going to include school children to a school system that's already kind of busting at the seams. Personally, my property, if I can show you where my property is right here, so we'll share the fence line with this. And he says it's 150-foot offset. That's just the building. That doesn't include the parking, so that would include just a rough count of their diagram, 60 parking spots along that, 20 feet from our house, which if it stays general business closes at night. General business doesn't operate on the weekends. Apartment complexes, it's 24 hours. We know that because there's already an apartment behind us. And their parking, luckily, is offset and is in front of the buildings, not behind them. That's not along the fence line. I'll conclude. I'll probably run over my time, but thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Jeremiah Kitchell.
Jeremiah Kitchell. I live at 224 David Brown Drive, so essentially the middle house that is directly across the street from the proposed commercial lot. Just had some general questions, certainly not here to get in the way of progress by any means, but wanted to understand if there's been any sort of rough civil engineering drafts as to how the public sewer will be ran, and if that will be run along David Brown Drive towards the development from Union Street, or if it'll be coming from, I guess, the commercial development on the west side of State Road 31. So that was kind of a point of clarity. And then I don't know the appropriate place to bring this up, but traffic for David Brown Drive. People haul down there. I don't know if it's part of test drive in cars for Tom Roush or just the fact that it's a nice straightaway. So the proposal of adding essentially 300 units, 300 cars, give or take, right there, I feel like it would be prudent to, prior to construction, even begin to lower that speed limit sign, just to retrain some behavior and make it a little safer. And then also a concern I had was just for the increased population density, the walking path that goes into downtown. I don't know that walking path has a name, but it kind of cuts behind the apartment complex and comes right into the new downtown park. There aren't any sort of pet receptacles or trash cans. So I know that bringing in 300 apartment units, that traffic is going to greatly increase. And as it stands right now, you can walk on that path and every 100 feet find a nice present from a pet. So it might make sense with this development to kind of improve some cleanup facilities along that path where we're going to have greater traffic. And then another thing with regards to that path and the additional traffic, as it stands right now, folks, and I don't know if it is just Amazon delivery drivers, I don't think it is, but there have been several instances where confused folks have turned off of Union onto that walking path as opposed to the street. So it might be prudent at the corner of Westfield Boulevard as well as Union Street to maybe get a vertical pylon insert to prohibit additional vehicles from getting confused and driving on that path. So appreciate the investment in the community and the consideration. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. We have another speaker.
Elaine Hinshaw.
I've already sent my comments in. I live at 1530 Woodside Drive. I do want to correct a statement in my comments. It says it says this should not be done by a well-thought-out process. I want to strike that "not." I want the commission to know that I appreciate the deliberations that are going over about the development that's going on in Westfield versus just developing for development's sake, because that seems to be what we've done previously. So to that end, I'm concerned about the PUDs in the piecemeal fashion that they're done. I don't know that this development, although it might be a great product, is the right thing for that site. I haven't seen any apartment complexes around that are 4 stories. And contrary to what Mr. Dubinsky, is that right, Dubinsky? No, it's not right. Dabashay, okay. I was thinking, contrary to what he says, I'm sorry. My concerns haven't been with the wooded site, although I'm suffering a lot of sadness because of the 60 acres to the south that they've just clear-cut everything recently. So I, like this gentleman, Mr. Kitchell, David Brown is not set up to have 300 apartment units come in out of that. Fine for the Lions Club to be there, but David Brown and where it tees into Union, oh my gosh, I'm afraid every time I go by there that I'm going to get hit off of Union Street. I think that there's a lot of, to me, it's kind of a scare tactic, if you will, for him, I'm not going to say your name again, to say something could be built there, business could be built there that's 7 or 8 stories high. What we see is probably what SEP is. Those kinds of buildings, I don't think there would be a lot of discussion about that because it is quiet. We don't even know it's there most of the time when I'm driving that road. So I'm not going to reiterate everything else, but I do appreciate what they're saying. I want to say, again, that the representatives from the city promised us that there would be no cut-through on Woodside Drive from Westfield Boulevard, that's going to stay a cul-de-sac. So I am holding the city to that promise. And the people that live in those 4 parcels, I want them to be treated fairly. They're an Asian couple. The gentleman he died last year, the husband died last year. So if there's gonna be something done there, then it needs to be done appropriately.
Thank you. Do we have any more cards?
Melvin Bruce.
My name is Melvin Bruce, and I live at 1416 Woodside. Our property is one of them, and it is totally adjacent to the proposed development. I have also sent in a correspondence detailing our concerns and thoughts about the project. The 2 things that probably I didn't say that I am concerned about, and one of them is the fact that we do have a cul-de-sac there, and there have been promises made by the city to not turn that into a freeway from another source. And I hope that the city can keep their word on that, because I've been here early on, back in the early 2000s, and to be honest, coming back out here tonight, I'm getting post-traumatic stress from being in here because of the things that we went through back then. I think that it's completely different now, and I applaud that and what you're doing. I don't believe that putting the hotel or putting the apartments in that piece of land behind us is a prudent thing to do, and at least from the standpoint of 2 reasons. One, we need to try to stay away from hopscotching if we can. But secondly, with the addition of the new apartments there, we now have Apartment Row down David Brown. And there's more apartment buildings than we have residences on Woodside. That seems a little out of place as far as I'm concerned. As far as the project goes and the builders and Bel Canto, I believe that they would be a good partner for the city to partner with. But I don't believe it should be partnered with on that piece of land behind us on Woodside. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have no additional cards, so if anyone additional would like to speak, please come forward. We also do not have any additional virtual comments.
Okay.
I can, just for the public's knowledge, state that I talked with Public Works Director Jeremy Lawler today, and he said while it is proposed that the frontage road is to connect from David Brown south, that the Woodside Estates could remain a cul-de-sac if it so chooses, or connect if they so choose. It would eventually be up to them. So that is still the case, that the cul-de-sac could remain if desired. So.
All right. I will go ahead and close the public hearing at 9:43. And John can respond to what he is able to.
We wanted to focus most on getting feedback from the Plan Commission, but the one thing I will say, that I think the Plan Commission understands there's no intent on a scare tactic. What we want to provide the Plan Commission is good information to make informed decisions. And today, the property is zoned planned business, PBPD, planned business, planned development. There are no requirements in the UDO for tree preservation. There are requirements in the UDO for a 45-foot setback. And there are no maximum building height requirements, save twice the distance from the right-of-way, which would permit a large building. If you asked me 15 years ago, did I think Riverview Hospital would make the investment that they have at the location they did, I would tell you no. But I can tell you that that type of investment is authorized as a permitted use under the current zoning today and could be made on this parcel of real estate. And that all that is an observation, so we can have an informed discussion about the context of it's not a woods. Well, again, it is a woods today, and the woods is zoned planned business, planned development. And what's being proposed is a development that would include multifamily, which is not authorized today, with greater setbacks, lower building heights, and more tree preservation and landscaping than is required under the ordinance today. I'm making an observation and not a judgment, because that's just what it is zoned today, and everybody needs to leave tonight with that clear understanding so that they can provide more input to the Plan Commission and to us moving forward based upon those facts. Because to say that it's a woods today, and I like that better, is an opinion. To say whether or not it is taller or generates more traffic, or is this, that, or, you know, all those items that we just talked about, needs to have a basis for comparison under the existing ordinance. Thanks.
Thank you. Time for commissioner comments.
Yeah, I'd like to lead off, if I could. First of all, I wanted to thank everyone for their patience tonight. You guys, this was the one topic that seemed to have the most public turnout, and you had to wait through everything else. And so your devotion and dedication and waiting 2.5 hours to make your voices heard is respectable and commendable, and I wanted to thank you for that. Along those same lines, thank you to everyone who spoke. You did so in a respectful and diplomatic fashion, and I appreciate that. I think this is the way this process should work. When we listen to feedback, we hopefully provide Mr. Dabashewitz with appropriate information that perhaps we could eventually all come to an agreement. And I echo that to those who emailed in as well. Because I got to tell you, not everybody's comments were respectful, and I have a huge problem with that. So for those of you who showed up and you calmly and with a level head presented your concerns, that's fantastic, and that's exactly how this process is supposed to work. Mr. Dabashewitz, I don't think I've ever spoken to you personally, but I wanted to let you know you do a great job in your presentation. I think you're incredibly thorough. I think you cover all angles of those who agree with perhaps what you're doing and those who may disagree. And I've been able to gather and gain a lot of information from you. I think you do a fantastic job. And again, the point you brought up with regards to how it's zoned already is a slippery slope. I mean, if that's how it's zoned, it's going to be challenging, I think, for this commission to recommend that nothing go in there, or that we wait for something that's more favorable. But again, I really hope that there can be a back and forth over the next few weeks, few months, to where these concerned citizens are satisfied with whatever the end product is. But again, I wanted to thank everyone for their patience, and I wanted to thank everyone for the way they presented themselves tonight. Very much appreciated, and that's how this process is supposed to work.
Thank you. Others?
I agree with everything you said, Matt. Thank you for that. This one's tough because to the extent that the proposed apartments are hidden, it does nothing to activate that employment corridor along 31. And to the extent that they are not hidden and can be seen perhaps through the landscaping and everything, it does nothing to activate 31. And so it's just kind of for me, you know, it's just there. And what I'm struggling with is the way it's zoned now, I think is what would maybe activate that, but then we have this beautiful neighborhood. We have Woodside in there that's now next to a freeway. And how do we bridge that, right? There's a challenge for us. So probably the best way to mitigate that, I think, is the direction that this is going. I don't think it's there yet. And I think everybody in Woodside, and I'm glad you showed up and spoke because we get to hear your concerns and they matter a lot. I think apartments are probably something you may really appreciate compared to what could be there, as we heard. But in terms of feedback to the petitioner, let's take it further in the direction it's going. Keep more trees, do a little more buffering, siting, things like that to even do better with Woodside and see how we bridge from things like a car dealership to single family. You know, we're kind of in between there where we need to try to respect that. It's a challenge, I get it. I think maybe smaller buildings might be part, you know, splitting apart. I'm not sure. I'm curious what everybody else comments on that, but something to ease that down a little bit more.
Could I speak for what happened at council, just so everyone's aware?
Please.
This obviously had an introduction at council, and I'd have to say, and Mike can back me up here, there was not support for this project to continue moving forward, but obviously they're here, and they've made that decision to move forward for consideration and, you know, to go through the process. Several reasons: the number of apartments we already have in this area, the number that will be under construction soon, the fact that this is the overlay, the US 31 overlay protected employment corridor that we are trying to build here, and this is in the downtown area. And so to put, again, more residential there was not supported as proper land use by the council, at least at introduction. So I just want to share that so everyone knew that going in.
Anything further to add, Mike?
I agree 100% with what Cindy said. There was virtually no support from the council.
And thank you for sharing that. I hadn't read all that to be caught up, but that speaks to that first part that I mentioned, where this just doesn't activate that employment corridor. And it would be easy for me to say, oh, this just isn't right here, if not for the fact that I see the need to transition to Woodside. So that's the rub. So thank you. That helps to hear what you had talked about.
Dr. Kelleher?
I agree. I think we had a project similar to this just north of 161st Street on the west side of 31 that proposed a little bit more commercial and then apartments. And we said that that was not the appropriate thing. We were looking for the 31 corridor to be more business. I have one question for staff. When I looked through our UDO under zoning, I couldn't find a GBPD. I found a GOPD. So I don't know if that got lost somewhere or what it says, because I had nothing to compare to.
Yeah, there's a section 4.23. It lumps together LBPD and GBPD together.
Okay.
So.
All right, yeah, because I didn't see it listed as a separate one, so I will look at that. Again, I think this is an employment corridor, and certainly someone can come in and develop it as the current zoning. But my guess is that we haven't gotten anything developed with current zoning in years, so whatever comes in here, business or office, will probably be a PUD, and we will have opportunity to address some of the issues that might be required in order to properly buffer from Woodside Estates.
Thank you.
Just one other comment.
Sure.
With regards to what Cindy just said, with regards to how council viewed this, I mean, to be fair, isn't this the same feedback we gave Birch with regards to Grand Millennium? Where, I mean, he was looking for townhomes and what have you, and we're looking for more of a business environment in that area.
Well, the Grand Millennium project is largely commercial, but it did have an apartment component.
Right, and
a
I
small
think that's
part
what
of
we
it,
were
and that-
saying,
That
yeah.
was back, and it's still
Right.
out in the developer's realm to figure out how to address the comments and come back with something or not.
Right.
As long as I'm talking, I'll weigh in similarly that this evaluation pretty much starts and stops for me at the location. This is not what US 31 in Westfield needs to be. We need it to be just what we've envisioned. If it takes longer to make that happen, that's what's gonna have to happen. But residential in this location is not what we are looking for, and this is a development that if there was another site in Westfield that the team was interested in pursuing, looks like a great development to have somewhere, just not here.
Could I ask you a question?
Sure.
And I've been doing this a while. What type of transmittal, if any, does the Plan Commission receive from council introduction? If they don't watch it or see it, do they get I guess what I'm saying, there should be a snippet in the staff report that says here was a paragraph about what happened at introduction to the Plan Commission, so they have the opportunity to see what the discussion was, because I don't intentionally omit things. And I don't want anybody to feel like, I'm glad Cindy said something, because I I don't know what the method is of transmitting council introduction comments from council to plan commission. And if there isn't one, perhaps one should be considered so that we are all aware of the discussion before, of those comments before they come in front of us. Meaning us, meaning the plan commission, so.
Sure, and Kevin may want to speak to this as well, but we've had broad discussions about the relationship between the two bodies. We have members that cross-pollinate, but we've all been encouraged to pay attention to the council agendas so that we, as part of our responsibilities as plan commissioners, are aware of it. There hasn't been a expectation that staff's going to write a synopsis of what council said. It's up to us to learn that, and I believe we all should be able to, especially in this day and age when we have a YouTube channel to watch it on.
Or potentially just a timed link to the section of the agenda in which it was discussed. I mean, you have your reports, just like we have the agenda on the plan commission, you click a link and it takes you to that document. It's just as easy to set up a link that goes to those few minutes where it's discussed at council. I click that button and I, as a plan commission member, have that information available to me immediately.
That's a great idea,
I
because it
agree.
doesn't summarize, it doesn't give opinion, it just links you right to what happened.
Here's the
Watch it if you
facts.
want to.
Yep,
Yeah.
I agree. Because when I occasionally go to council to hear something that's been presented that I know may be controversial, I've got to sift through the whole thing. And frankly, with 2 meetings a month and agendas and things given to us on a Thursday afternoon, or evening, that's another whole layer that I find difficult to get, so.
And I
it'll
know-
make it
That's
easier.
just a suggestion. I'm not being critical of how the work's being done. I just.
Well, I
It'd be
certainly,
great if
thank
even
you.
counselors, could just send a note to the plan commission about each, but then it'd be a violation of open door laws, so at least I believe it would,
Yeah.
and so we can't do that either, but staff could issue something.
yeah, no, I appreciate this discussion and feedback. I think that's a good suggestion. I think Mr. Horke is correct, though. I think historically, there's been, maybe expectation is the right word, that there would be some,
It's our due diligence.
well, and
responsibility.
also the two council representatives would also be kind of helping share that information, like what happened this
Absolutely.
evening.
And
So,
similarly, they're presumably telling council next Monday, here's what happened at
yeah,
ABC.
exactly.
And we'll
There is
relay
that.
our commentary.
There is that reporting kind of back and forth function that happens, but maybe it's out of order in our scenario here. So, yeah, I think there's certainly things that we can do to enhance that communication. If it's something you'd like for us to see, include in our staff reports as a link, we could do that, or as a separate link on the agenda. I think there's things we can do to make that simpler for you to find that piece of information in the council.
Well, now that you have lots and lots of people overflowing in your department, you
We're
probably
still-
have a few more minutes that you could do that.
Yeah,
so.
we're still
I find the
onboarding,
meetings
but-
riveting. I can't take my eyes off the screen once I start watching.
I'll,
Actually, I do skip through sometimes to figure out where the item is, but it's a little cumbersome, but
I'll say that sometimes it helps when I catch up on how things are introduced to council, and sometimes I wish I hadn't, because then I'm coming into my own preparations with somebody else's comments and opinions on my mind. So there's that's something to be considered about that as well. But back to this particular agenda item, I feel like we're gradually driving a stake through this particular, maybe not even very gradually, but I wonder if we could offer any more specific, so we want commercial here, and that was the thing that struck me right away. But once again, we've got Woodside. So what can we offer as a way? John mentioned there's a trade-off, and you were presenting this as a trade-off, and whether we think it's the right trade-off or not, maybe we should try to get more specific feedback on how to do that. How do we get commercial here and not put something next to that nice neighborhood that would be really objectionable? I don't have that solution. I'm wondering if we could try to maybe offer that.
As I said earlier, I think that anybody who comes in to this site to develop it as commercial, when that time comes, will probably bring us a PUD. I haven't seen anything that goes with straight zoning, and having not had a chance to look at the GBPD, I suspect there are things in there that they would want to modify and come in for a PUD, and I think that's our opportunity to address Woodside.
and that's likely true. The PD part of the four-letter acronym kind of brings us an advantage, because that means you've got, I believe, if I remember correctly, a bigger responsibility for planning across the entire site, more so than you might otherwise.
Right,
And
right.
it exists in a couple of places around Westfield. I always used to refer to it as the meatloaf of zoning, because it didn't seem to be all that much of anything in particular, but a lot of everything. And it did bring us, though, I believe, some advantages. But those days of expecting the development community to come that way probably are past. But that's not really material for tonight as much as it is if we have any other comments. There's half the commission that hasn't offered anything yet, and they're not obligated to find something to say just to fill dead air. But if Dave or somebody
Just
the other
to
way.
chime in, I agree. The threshold issue of getting past the employment corridor issue is a big problem for me. While I recognize what you said about the width of the corridor going out to Union Street, that the unique aspect of this parcel is you've got frontage, you've got visibility, and for that reason, it just seems like a misuse of the property to go residential from my perspective.
Okay, thank you. The other way, Kristen and Victor have any thoughts to share? You haven't spoken yet? that I'm
Yeah,
aware of?
I'll just fill some dead air. I mean, already been spoken, but first I'd like to say again, as Matt started us off with, thank you for coming out tonight. It is very much so appreciated. We need more public involvement. Our job is to analyze and listen. So listening was that part, analyzing this part, and two words that stick out to me: employment corridor. I mean, that's the biggest thing. Do we want to be driving down 31 and seeing apartments? As nice as they may be, and I mean, they are catered towards my demographic, be a great place to live, be a great place to work from home, but it is not part of our employment corridor vision. So that's just the biggest thing I'm hung up on, just like everyone else up here. So thank you.
Thank you.
Just to Andre's point, John, there's a place in Nashville that maybe I did send it to you on the other one across the street, but it's called One City Nashville. It's mixed use, but it's really an interesting commercial mix of a lot of different things, culinary. It would be a really interesting idea with the Woodside neighborhood, because there would be a good opportunity to buffer them, and maybe as much as they wanted to integrate into some type of development, which would, I think, be really interesting if there were coffee shops or things that they could walk and bike to that didn't inhibit their lifestyle, but added to their lifestyle. And I think that that's just a mindset that I'd really like to see us shift to in our community, is that we're adding benefits to the people that live here versus taking things away from them. And as much as we can do that, I would really appreciate that. I think on this particular parcel, we have a lot of woods, and there's going to be a nice way to transition to those people if we do it, and we need to do it. So, thank you.
Thank you. We've all had opportunity to share thoughts. I think, Andre, you want to?
Sorry, yep, I just
Wrap
turned
us
my
up?
green light on again.
Sure, okay.
And again, we're not here to design your site, but is attempting to be specific. I looked at it again just now, and I thought, the what if, and I'm sure the timing of this doesn't work, but like a Lions Club down at the southeast corner would do that transition to, in my book, from Woodside to then what could be full commercial the rest of the way north of there. And I know it's probably impossible right now to rearrange everything that's being considered, but something like that, whatever like that means, could bridge that gap. That's the kind of feedback I was trying to figure out how to give you.
Well, we appreciate it. We appreciate all your comments, and of course, there's a solution for this piece of real estate, and we'll take into consideration everything we've heard tonight, and that solution may or may not fit the program that Belcanto has, and that's okay. We want to hope that we can reach a solution that does include them, and we'll strive to do that, and I'll keep my ears open for this committee pseudo process that's been discussed, and And as things progress, we may try to take advantage of that if we have modifications to share with the Plan Commission at a future date.
Okay. As you heard during the dialogue on that first item, though, that's not just around the corner. That is going to be a little ways out before we can get all of our tools lined up in the right order to be able to start having that sort of a gathering for this group.
Understood.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. That completes our scheduled agenda items. Everything else is continued to a future meeting with the exception of a project that was referenced just a little bit ago, Landing 161 PUD, the MI Homes component that was just a little south and on the other side of the street from the site we just discussed. That was actually withdrawn, and we'll need to refile for whatever they might choose to do if they are in fact considering proceeding, but that one is gone for the time being. So we're down to reports and comments. Any Plan Commission members have comments for the group? If not, then we'll move on to downtown update was scheduled next.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to give a quick update on what we're doing on the Streetscape committee and team. There was a little bit of confusion regarding, I guess, an article that was in the Current about what's happening with the downtown and the different groups. So I just wanted to add just a little bit of clarity to that quickly. Steve Latour and Dan Moyer are heading up a group that is doing market research in our downtown, and that was commissioned by Mike Johns and the council for them to look into road infrastructure, parking, and business types. And so that's something that's in a contract between the council and the DWA, that they should be trying to do that type of work. And so they are doing that, which is really exciting and fantastic for the city. Running parallel is a team that you all are aware of. Mike and Cindy and Bob are all helping in different aspects of that team, which is a streetscape team. We have Public Works involved, the Parks Department, Kevin's sitting on it. And we have also Dan Moyer and Steve Latour. So we have the kind of connection between the two groups, as well as Dave is helping with that other group. So there's just a lot of collaboration and crossing of the two groups so we know what each group is doing, yet they are separate. And the Streetscape group is doing implementation of the comp plan, which is something that needed to be done. And now is the moment to do that. And so I hope that adds clarification. If anyone has questions, I mean, those of you that are here, if you have questions, I'm happy to answer those. The Streetscape team is going to be working on landscaping, lighting, sidewalks, sidewalk materials, public seating, wayfinding signage, general signage, and anything like that goes with the streetscape. And so that team is moving forward. And we are right now soliciting some outside help with some consultants to give us ideas for that. And specifically on State Road 32, which we found out has a pretty quick deadline for our participation as we work together with NDOT on that section between East Street and Westfield Boulevard. That particular portion of us giving some input to that, the due date is March 31st. So it will come quickly, and we will, or I will, be in front of the APC sharing that information. And next Monday at council, I will be going through the whole project for the city council. And I don't know if you have anything to add. Please jump in, Mike, Cindy, Bob.
Thank you for all your hard work,
Yep.
Kristin. You've been doing like triple duty, so we really appreciate all your effort.
Ditto.
Covered it very well.
You're welcome.
A lot of interesting things in your last email.
Thank you. Yeah. Trying to get it all.
Council
Organized
liaison.
and forward.
Before we move on, I think we thought we would just keep this downtown update as kind of a permanent fixture on our agendas, at least as long as we are actively
Sure.
having groups look at items, just to keep everybody informed, so. Just
Good
be
plan.
aware, it'll be there. If there's no update, we'll simply say no update at this time, but
Yeah.
keep it on there as a reminder.
Kind of like plan commissioner comments, when there's hardly ever any. But, city council liaison, Cindy?
Well, we did meet January 10th, and Mike Johns, our famous Mike Johns, reelected by council to serve as president, and he reappointed Joe Edwards to serve as VP. Mike and I were reappointed to this body, and Bob Beaudry and Linda Nass were reappointed to the RDC. Rob Gaylor was sworn in as our brand-new fire chief, and we had a presentation on student impact, and our council voted to sponsor a table at their upcoming fundraiser. Please consider joining their Black Tie Bingo event coming up. Urban Apples, that was one that was discussed. Kind of ended weird. We did not have a vote, and we agreed to have another kind of special meeting, although I think it has not been scheduled yet, for council to do more of a workshop, if you will. There was a lot of remaining concerns with Urban Apples, and so they didn't feel comfortable voting on it yet. Don't know when that's going to happen. Maybe Kevin can, he probably doesn't know either. Okay. And we approved a fiscal plan and voluntary annexation for the Ayler property. If you're familiar with Marla Ayler, her property. So that was it. I think it's your turn.
No,
Oh,
I can do
yeah,
it.
you-
BZA
I wasn't
had-
sure if Cindy was through yet, but yeah,
Oh,
BZA
I'm
did
sorry,
meet,
yeah.
so.
I'm done.
please
BZA's
stay.
up, all right, yeah, BZA met last week and approved well, first off, we did officer elections as well. Victor and I are both officers. I'm chair, Victor's vice chair. And we approved 3 standards variances, 2 were pool location variances, and the third was an individual on Little Eagle Creek Avenue that needed to encroach into a side yard setback to accommodate a patio. He's up against a wooded property, so it was a very low impact kind of a request, so it was a pretty straightforward evening.
Very good. Community development, anything?
No, nothing really new. We covered some of the stuff I was going to hit on earlier in the meeting, but just wanted to announce as of the first of the year, Pam Howard is now Assistant Director of Community Development Department. So we've moved her up. We're doing a little bit of kind of restructuring, included at the end of last year, the promotion of Dane and Caleb, both the senior planner. So these new planner positions that we're filling in, first quarter this year, will be filling into that hierarchy. So that's it.
Very good, thank you.
Thanks.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
By Dr.
Second.
Kelleher, second by Victor. All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Light shut off at 10:14.